is called to order. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we will move to the first item on the agenda for the hearing, which is the PC 15-223, CU 15-01, and SP 15-10, conditional use and site plan design review for PGE substation expansion on 18th Street and Main Street extension. Carrie, you want me to go ahead and read this now?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a quasi-judicial hearing script that I'm going to read that applies to this hearing item. Public hearings on land use applications are scheduled tonight. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the report. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We will now open the record for the files that I just read. Does any commissioner have any ex parte contacts, or has anyone visited the site?
Well, I think we need to all declare for the record that many of us are PGE customers, and so therefore we do have some financial implications with regard to this. I don't know if it affects us, but and I also have visited the site. So I am a PGE customer, and I have visited the site.
I'm a PGE customer. I drive by the site on a regular basis, and 60 years ago we used to own that land.
We as in?
My
Not him.
grandfather.
Grandfather, is that
So,
right?
yes. 70 years ago.
Bob?
I'm a customer and I'm late on my bill.
Well, you can't stay then. You'll have to leave then.
I'm a customer and I have visited this site, although not recently.
I've gone by the site, and I'm also a PGE customer.
And I'm a PGE customer, and I'm familiar with the area, but I have not specifically visited the site. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to question any of the commissioners on their disclosures? Seeing none,
My
we
bill
will
isn't paid.
proceed. Who is giving the staff report? Kelly?
Thank you, Chair Kidwell. This project is Site Plan Design Review SP 1510 and Conditional Use File Number CU 1501. To run through the process for quasi-judicial hearings, we've opened the hearing. I will be giving a brief overview. Then we'll see an applicant's presentation. After that, public testimony. Applicant can then rebut. The record will close, and then commission deliberation and potentially a decision. The property is located on Main Street Extension and 18th. It's bordered by a few industrial uses. On the right on your screen there, you'll see the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. 17th Street to the south on the other side of that is Abernathy Creek, and then Wood Feathers manufacturing business. To the north is another industrial site that is Unobtainium Company. And on the other side of Main Street is I-205 on-ramp, so it's ODOT right-of-way. There is a dwelling located in the lower left corner, 309 17th Street. That structure is no longer used as a dwelling. It's an office use. And there was recently a dwelling at 308 18th Street. You can see the kind of vacant portion there. That home or that building was demolished in 2012. It was a historic listed property. In 2012, the property owner applied for delisting of that to our Historic Review Board. The Historic Review Board approved that through file HR 1206, and then the building was subsequently demolished. And so PGE owns both the 306 and 308, the vacant parcel. The proposal is to expand the substation at 306 Main Street. The expansion would include new equipment that would include the property at 308 that was purchased recently. The proposal also includes to enclose the new area of the substation with a wall, 8-foot wall, a stone kind of concrete material that appears as brick, and then with landscaping around that. Currently, the substation is enclosed by a chain link fence. The applicant also proposes barbed wire that will be on the inside of the fence, and it would not be visible from the public right-of-way. These are existing condition photos and then a conceptual rendering of the new equipment, wall, and landscaping. This is from Main Street.
Where's the wall?
Well, Denise can't see that. The wall's right here, and then on your screen, can you see my mouse on your
Yeah,
screen?
you can see it on the
Okay,
screen.
so
Now I can,
Wall
but-
is right here. You can see some of the new equipment, but it looks very similar to the existing equipment. There's some of it right there. And PGE recently submitted photos of a similar wall This is in southeast Portland, near OMSI. Is that right? Yeah. So this is the treatment that's being proposed here as well.
What is that?
And they proposed 3 different species of landscaping. I pulled photos from Google Images just to kind of show you what that landscaping looks like when mature. And then I want to highlight a few selected conditions of approval in the staff report. One is for some additional landscaping, and then another is for street trees along Main Street and 18th Street. 17th Street currently has street trees, but Main Street and 18th Street do not. We typically, for new development, require any street improvements and traffic-related improvements. There's really no traffic impact of this project. And so while Main Street isn't built to our full desired standard, because there's no traffic impact, we're not requiring that, except for street trees, which aren't in place currently. And so this is some of the current screening, the landscaping there, disguising the existing fence. And that's from Main Street. It's in really good, healthy condition. And then this is from 17th Street. You can see the chain link fence to the left side of that photo, kind of behind that pole. It has red slatted plastic in it. And then that landscaping is shielding the substation and the fence from that structure there at 309 17th Street. What this photo shows along 17th is a gap in the landscaping where one can see directly into the substation property. And so one of the conditions of approval is to add additional landscaping where that gap exists to better screen that. There will be new equipment that's closer to this, to 17th Street, so the screening will be important there. And then the street trees, I don't have pictures of Main Street other than what you guys have seen in your site visits, but street trees could be in place behind the sidewalk potentially. It's about a 5-foot curb tight sidewalk, so the requirement for street trees could mean that they're going behind the sidewalk. There's room for that. And if we find that there's not room for that, or if it's not going to work out, then there are, our code does allow placement of street trees to be off-site or by fee in lieu. And so staff's recommendation is approval with the conditions in the staff report. And I'd like to enter this presentation into the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
I have a question of staff.
You have a staff question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, just one moment. Let's.
How wide is the sidewalk along there? Because it looks awfully narrow to me.
It's between 4 and 5 feet.
That's kind of what I thought. I think that your suggestion of planting some additional trees is really good, and I don't know whether we can do it, but I would not like to see a condition where it's in fee in lieu of, because I think that we're getting a couple of trees removed, and having some additional trees along there would go a long way to replace those. And do you know, well, I guess I can ask them, I was curious about the surface inside the yard. Is going to be all blacktop?
It's actually gravel, and
gravel.
they're proposing that that the new area be gravel as well.
Okay. I'm assuming there's also drainage in there.
All the grading and storm standards apply. Because of the gravel surface, they might not actually cross the threshold of requiring stormwater treatment and detention.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, wasn't suggesting that. I just know that sometimes in some of their facilities, vehicles get parked in there, and you can't always guarantee that your car isn't or truck isn't going to be drippy with some other oily substance.
Any other questions for staff?
Nope, that was it.
Okay, so we will hear from the applicant at this time.
Good evening. Thank you. Is this on? Okay. My name's Mary Dorman. I'm a land use planner with Angelo Planning Group in Portland, 921 Southwest Washington, 97205. And with me here,
Hi, I'm Jim Vonenkamp, and I'm with Portland General Electric. I'm the project manager for the Abernathy substation expansion. Portland General Electric, 121 Southwest Salmon Street in Portland, Oregon.
and then we also have behind us Paul Shedler, is also with PGE Civil Engineering on the project, in case you have specific questions that I can't answer. We're going to keep our presentation really brief. I know you have 2 other hearing items tonight. I don't think many of the people in the room are here for this item, so we'll keep it short and sweet. We support the staff report and are comfortable with the conditions of approval as recommended by staff. And I think to follow up on the issue of the street tree, certainly can accommodate the planting along the Main Street frontage. The one issue that is still a little bit up in the air, but I don't think it causes an issue for us, relates to the dedication of right-of-way along the Main Street frontage. Staff had asked for 40 feet from center line, and we basically identified that based on the existing striping of the center line in the street. But there's been some question about the surveys with the state and city right-of-way together. So PGE's actually had a survey go out there and will confirm if that right-of-way dedication is in the exact way shown on our plan, on our site plan. Because the city does have a standard that requires a certain setback from the property line based on the height of the new equipment. If that right-of-way dedication changes anything at all, we can adjust internal to the wall and still meet that standard. So we could either move the equipment back inside, and from the street, from the sidewalk, nothing would look different. You would still have the wall and the landscaping on the outside. So if you have specific questions, be happy to field that. Other than that, we're comfortable with the recommendation and the conditions.
Questions for the applicant? Bob?
Have you given any consideration to the possibility of putting some historical artwork on that brick wall? I mean, after all, this is Oregon City, and we're just dripping in history. What kind of responses do you have for that?
We don't have that on any of our stations in the metro area at this time. It's been proposed in the past. We would not object to it. We'd have to look into it. It'd be a matter of finding artists or so forth that might want to partner with us. We also like to have the landscaping as somewhat of a security feature in front of the walls if necessary. So having access to the wall plus landscaping we'd have to see how that would work. Yeah.
Might obscure it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the visual simulation, and that's just a blow up of what was shown tonight, and also in the application. Over time, you can see in front of the wall there are plantings, there are shrubs that will grow up. So if you put something on the wall, it could well be blocked.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, Bob, your idea is intriguing only from the standpoint that I was going to say for the record that this is part of the historic Greenpoint neighborhood, and there are very few homes left in this area from that particular early century, and that the house that was removed was approximately circa 1895, so it wasn't Victorian or decorative, but it was an older home, and Greenpoint basically existed there primarily before even some of the development in the McLaughlin neighborhood, so it is an older area, and maybe your idea has something to do with, maybe it's the Greenpoint substation, I don't know. What I wanted to ask was, I know that this division has a number of substations in it all over parts of Oregon City, but I did notice that the evergreen shrub, the picture that was shown adjacent to the office building, is a little bit overgrown and looks like it's in need of some maintenance, and I know you guys are stretched pretty thin. So what I wanted to know was, what is the maintenance follow-up when you have plantings and materials like this? You try to get to them on a regular schedule, or you get to them when you can, because I know, again, your crew is stretched pretty thin.
Yeah, the way it normally works is we have a once-a-month visit by maintenance people to most of our substations. They'll identify if there's overgrown shrubs that not only overgrown but causing ability for someone might be able to get in the yard or something like that. So we've got crews that will go out and maintain it, both PGE crews and contract landscaping crews that that maintain our vegetation around our sites.
So they just haven't gotten to that one yet.
Must not have. I can bring that up.
So the plantings that are proposed in the submittal, those are going to be fairly low-growing things, because obviously you don't want them to grow up to the point to where they're obscuring your site access into the facility.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing there on the picture is mature landscaping after a few years, yes.
And on the other side that had been identified for filling in the gaps from the 17th Street side, that's arborvitae over there, so I don't know if staff wanted us to plant something similar or something
No,
different.
please don't.
Okay, so something other than arborvitae.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Could you put that one back up?
It
That
probably
slide,
wouldn't hurt to
Kelly.
even put some native shrubs in there too. Like
Arborvitae
Steinbark
is not native to
Right.
our
Douglas
area.
spirea and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
It
so
kind of
this-
looks like,
So
it kind of
this-
looks like laurel, is what it looks like to me, or some sort of laurel hedge.
Yeah.
And you're not proposing to put any more slats in the fence, are you?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, perfect. They always,
Because it's going to not be a fence. It's
I think the
putting
laurel
slats in
hedge
there.
is actually on the other property,
yeah, it
not
may
on
be.
PGE property.
Yes.
There was some on the
Correct.
backside there, where you
Right.
can see in the very back of the photo, there's some
On the
stuff
wood
that's
feather side.
sticking up. I don't know
Mm.
if that's on your side or not, but
So this might be a little bit beyond the scope, but are you guys working on disaster preparedness, security, and improvement of communication between police, fire, and you guys when things happen to these power stations?
Well, most
substations?
of all of our substations are remotely alarmed and controlled. So you'll have, there's anything that goes on inside the substation, our control center downtown picks that up through alarms and through systems. Immediately contacts emergency, either PGE crews or fire crews or police crews, if that's the case.
Okay.
So they're automated. So, yep. And this, as part of this project, we will be improving some of the internal remote control alarms and systems with this project also. So, bringing it kind of up to more current standards.
And
Any
then-
other questions for the
Yeah, what-
applicant?
So the lighting was mentioned, that there was going to be lighting, but I didn't really see any specifics of what that was going to be. Is that going to be like typical lighting that I might see on other substations?
Yep, just a real low background light, and then lights to turn on if a crew's in there at night to work, but typically we don't go in at night to work unless there's an
Emergency, yeah. I see on the, let's see, which one is this? Which sheet is it? It looks like it's ABRN 1000. It shows a couple of light poles. And I don't see, I'm looking for any other lighting on here.
This substation will service what area and how many people?
Well, it's, there's only a single transformer there right now, so we want to put a second transformer for just expected growth. You know, down in the downtown Oregon City, there's planned developments, and developers come to us with their projected loads over the coming years, and we have to be able to support that. Well, the single transformer at this substation cannot necessarily handle all of that load, so we have to put a second one in somewhere for redundancy and for backup, because you don't want to tap out your transformers with all of your loads in case there's weather events. You have to have a little bit of spare space in your transformers. So with the planned growth expected by developers around this part of Oregon City, that's the driving force for this second transformer at this substation.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a couple. First, how would the light poles work if they're there for an emergency repair to the power station?
There's a
Backup.
photo cell that will just have really low light on, just so that someone can drive by and drive in, look to see that everything's in good condition. And then if a crew comes in to do work, then you turn on additional lights that are on that light pole. So each light pole will have
Right,
like
but
two or
where's the power going to come for the light pole if they're
Oh,
there
back.
doing work on the power
Oh,
station?
our substation's got battery backup in them.
Okay.
So all of our substation, both AC and DC.
And getting to the whole drive-by and look in, has the police department weighed in on the transparency issues that are going to go away? I mean, right now, they can drive by from two sides at least and look in and see if there's kids screwing around or squirrels munching on the lines or whatever. When you put that brick wall in, there's going to be one narrow little spot to look, and that's it. And so when the alarm goes off,
Well, the gate right by that wall won't have any covering, so you can see.
right, but somebody could be,
Yeah.
behind a building, I mean, this is going to become one very big blank area for any police or, well, particularly police. Fire, they're going to be dealing with the fire, and they're not going to care about intruders, but
Have you seen the treatment that they have on, there's a facility in the Lloyd district that has some brick, but it's also got some openings in it
so
so
it
that
looks like windows, looks like
yeah,
building
so it's
windows.
not like a huge, big, blank brick wall. Maybe something like that
That's kind of where I was going
might
with
be
it
more
was-
appropriate so
um,
that you could kind of,
I mean, I know what you're
Look in.
after, and there's a level of security to that, but, if something does happen, kids start screwing around, somebody breaks in because they want the copper wire for, gee whiz, who knows what, it'd be useful for, emergency responders to have multiple, at least view access into it, so that would be my concern about having that solid wall all the way around. The other thing is it kind of looks prison-y, and that's,
you don't want that.
not really what we're about anymore.
Would
So-
you be willing to do something with some openings in it that could be resubmitted to staff for them to look at, rather than just a solid blank wall?
And I'm not,
I'm not
doesn't need to
sugge-
be like the one in Lloyd where
Well,
there's
that's-
a lot of them, but, 2 or 3, on like the 17th Street side. For one thing, the people that are curious can, ooh, that's what a substation looks like. I mean, I used to,
The wall will only be along the Main Street frontage, not on 17.
it isn't going to go on 17.
No, it's
gonna-
only
Just
on
on
the
Main.
portion that's
I
expanding
thought it
out.
was both
Yeah.
directions.
It would still
No.
look nicer if it had some openings. Can we put that in, Kelly?
Yeah.
Well, there was also a concern. We're in the floodplain here, and so balance cut and fill is an issue, and so they're trying to minimize the thickness and the amount of material in the floodplain, and so I think the wall is not really thick for that reason.
So you don't need to have it be thick to have an opening. It's basically how that it's laid, and then you go around it, and then there's an opening.
Would the opening be covered with or what would
Oh, however you
what
did
would
in
be the
Lloyd
opening?
district.
Just,
I don't remember. I just know it looks like a fake building with the substation inside it. When you drive by, you can kind of look through, and I don't recall whether it has like chain link through the openings.
I think chain link's on the other
Or
side
if
of
it's just
it.
bars, I
think
just
it
don't
has
know.
wire grills.
Yeah, but frankly, I thought it was going to be 17th Street was going to be bricked over too. That's where my concern is.
It's just Main Street.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it's
Yeah, Main seemed to be the focus of the pedestrian
Where's Main
quality
Street?
environment.
Right
We
here.
first came in with chain link fence with landscaping, and staff encouraged us to do something.
okay, yeah,
Different.
I guess I'm going to back off of my concerns then at this point, because that was just, you get somebody behind your building hiding from the cops. No, there's nothing there while they're busy ripping all the copper out of everything.
I don't know if the windows mattered as much, but it would be nice. I was looking at the example that you guys had in Portland, and it looks like the example that you guys have in the actual rendering here is a little bit different, and there's some pilasters to show a little relief in the walls.
so the
So it would be kind of nice to have that, and instead of having
Yeah.
just one continuous
Monolith.
straight wall down,
Yeah.
it would be nice to have some relief in that, so that there's some architectural
Detailing,
detailing in it. Yep.
Yeah, I agree
And
with
it
that.
looked like, instead of the brick, it looked like there was vertical boards or horizontal boards. You might
You want to go to that?
terminology.
That's what it
mixed
looked
up.
like initially to me, but it is brick.
But it might be brick.
well, this
And-
is yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and that's up to you guys. It doesn't
Is
really
this the
matter
one
to me
on
which
Water
you wanna
Avenue?
do. But
It's
Well,
next
this
to
is
the-
on just across from
Biopsy.
Monty. Yep.
Well, by Pioneer Waterproofing, or their former Pioneer Waterproofing building.
But it would almost be nicer if you made those pilasters a little bit larger, a little wider, to kind of break up the monotony. small detail, but you can play around with that and see what it looks like.
The samples from the fencing company that makes this product, there were some that were also like different colors.
Yeah.
You could have
Yeah.
the verticals be a different color.
Yeah, you could almost have them
Yeah.
just cement almost and have them as a different, and have the earth tones kind of.
Okay, do we have any more questions for the applicant at this time?
So I think we're looking at making a recommendation that
Well,
includes some detailing
Right.
on the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those could be some additional conditions of
Conditions, yeah.
approval. Okay, thank you. At this time, are there anybody from the public that, I don't have any cards for this item. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this issue? Not everybody at once, please.
Yes.
Okay, well, seeing none,
Any rebuttal from the applicant?
yes, any rebuttal for that comment?
Well, there wasn't any testimony to rebut, so.
That's right. Well, I would suggest we close the public hearing portion of this testimony.
Would you please close the public hearing,
It's closed.
since,
You didn't pay.
There's-
attention.
Oh, you want the little,
oh,
It's
sure,
not
just
official.
be official,
Okay, it's
yeah,
official.
yeah, just go for
um,
it.
so, discussion among the commission?
Well, the only thing I think we've got is that there be more or less uniformity in the wall, whether it's broken up by pilasters or holes or color, just so it isn't monolithic. And I don't know quite how that would read as a condition.
I think the picture we have with the pilasters is probably an example of what they've already done.
Right.
We have any consensus on whether or not that's an acceptable condition?
Well, I think they've got a golden opportunity here to weigh in and do something very, design-wise, very unique, and I don't see it in this blank wall. To me, it looks like a target for graffiti, and, which is sad to say, but, it's happened before, but I think that if just a little imagination on that wall would go a long ways.
You're constrained though with the shrubberies though.
Yeah, I see that too.
But the shrubbery is it's low growing, it's not going to be tall, at least the examples that were shown
At least not
from staff.
yours.
Those don't get real tall.
So I'd like to see the pilasters get a little wider and then integrate some native vegetation for the shrubs.
So do we have a consensus on how to word a condition of approval that we would?
I can throw something out unless Kelly has an idea.
I was going to make a suggestion
Okay.
that we recommend that as an additional condition of approval that the proposed wall along Main Street have sufficient detail to not allow for a monolithic profile, and that there be pilasters of sufficient width to. What do you want to say, Paul? How wide?
Provide adequate relief for.
Right.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Whatever, yeah.
The applicant shall construct a proposed wall that is less monolithic, such as the inclusion of pilasters, openings, or you want to put anything?
No, pilasters or openings.
Anything else?
Paul wanted native plants.
That's a separate one.
There was a comment about using a different color
Yeah.
Oh,
for the
yeah.
pilasters
Yeah.
too.
I don't know what the cost is between this brick. I'm not sure if it's like the real thing or it's a veneer versus like split face CMU, which has some relief to it. There's the rough style that gives it some volume. So when you're looking at it, it's not just a flat surface all the way across.
Which also makes it less of a graffiti target.
Exactly.
Actually, the more texture, the more
More
difficult
texture.
it
Yeah.
is to
The more
remove.
texture, the more
It is-
difficult it is
It is
to
to remove, but the less appealing it is
Yes.
for the initial attack.
Yes.
It's a catch-22.
Yeah.
What was the other condition that we were talking about? The
And then
Native plants.
Native
yeah.
plants.
Native shrubs.
Yeah, I apologize. I belong to the I Really Hate Arborvitae Club. It's just not a native material, and it just, when it starts getting old and dead, it looks so bad.
Yeah, I found that English ivy does such a much better job covering walls.
Do you think so? Oh yeah, that's on the noxious weed list.
Hey,
so
if it's
we
good
do-
enough for Harvard, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, well, it's not English ivy like we have here.
That was a joke, by the way, folks. I do know the difference. All I have to do is look at all the trees in my
Really,
canyon.
where are the shrubs to be planted?
Along
Along
Main
this-
Street.
The additional ones?
17th. Where
In
the
this
opening
photo,
is.
it's actually around the corner
Corner.
on the other side of that, a yellow house.
It's along 17th where
Should
the
I
chain link.
identify it in the conditions?
Well, that condition is already in the staff report, and it references the photo. It references 17th Street and the yellow structure. So I think the location
Number
of that is
7.
clear.
Yeah.
So what we'd be looking
I believe that's
there
a
is
designated
just to
landmark as well.
include language to say that the plantings would be native plants.
They'll last longer. Well, I would make that motion with those 2 additional conditions.
Second.
Okay, so I'm clear. We're modifying condition of approval for the additional landscaping to add that that landscaping must be native
Number 7.
Yeah.
and not arborvitae.
Please.
Correct.
Okay.
I will be so happy.
And then adding an additional condition for the wall.
Okay, and what I have written here is the proposed wall shall be less monolithic through the use of wider pilasters, more texture, openings, or color variety.
Great.
Yeah.
And when they come in for site plan design review, you could shoot us a courtesy copy so we can see what it looks like. Not because we're not going to prove it, but we feel comfortable with that. So I'll call for the question.
Second? It's been moved.
It's already
and
been
seconded.
Moved and seconded.
It's been moved and seconded?
Yes,
Yep,
ma'am.
Moved
Okay.
and seconded.
Do you have it up on your screen?
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
Aye.
Chair Kidwell?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Actually, the motion
Go
carries.
forth and bring good power.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, well, I believe some new folks have arrived, so we're going to have to reread the quasi-judicial hearing procedures.
I was
Make-
really looking forward to
Make
that.
Bob,
I knew you were.
make Bob read it.
You know, if I was paying attention, I would have recorded that
then-
before I
And then we
started.
could have just played it again.
Exactly.
I have not got out of the remedial reading class yet, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I practically had the whole thing memorized, so
It's all about the specificity.
it is about the specificity.
Maybe sing it.
You want to sing it?
Sure.
Okay,
What-
so
In what key?
next up on our agenda is PC 15-220 and ZC 15-04 zone change, and PZ 1502 amendment to the comprehensive plan, and CP 15-02 master plan amendment. So, as requested, I am going to read again the quasi-judicial hearing script.
All right, we're going to time you.
Thank you. For the public hearing on the land use action that we're considering tonight, a staff report has been prepared for this application and been made available to the public 7 days before the public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to this applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to the staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence or testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for the consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both, without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond. The issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to these issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. At this time, do any of the commissioners have any ex parte contacts, conflicts, bias, or any other statements to declare? And has any of the commissioners visited the site prior to this meeting?
I get to start again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am going to be declaring ex parte contact. I attended the meeting that's in the record on June 4th, 2015. I was also in attendance at a meeting on June 30th, 2015. And in addition, I attended a citizen involvement committee meeting for another item. Willamette Falls was there giving the same presentation that I heard at a previous meeting, and I don't think that there's anything that they've presented that is going to be different than what they will present tonight. I also want to declare that I have been in the past and in the present and in the future a patient at Willamette Falls Hospital. One of my doctors is licensed to be there, and I have visited the site on many, many, many occasions. And I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, so I also have been to the area where the proposed development is going to occur in the future.
Is that all?
That's all. I can't say that I've practiced at Willamette Falls, but I had a baby there, so that counts.
Close enough.
That counts, yeah.
Can you outdo that?
Can you do that? Oh,
Well, I didn't attend as many meetings as she did, but I was present at the June 4th neighborhood meeting. But I can one-up her in that I live 3 blocks away from it, and I was born there.
Not in that one?
In the original building, yes.
Oh.
I, of course, know the site and all the proposed areas because that's my neighborhood. I walk around it all the time.
Bob?
I'm familiar with the area, but no ex parte contact.
Haven't had any babies there.
No, that didn't come out all right.
Okay.
No ex parte contacts for me, and I'm familiar with the site.
I have had a son there. As a planner in my previous life in Oregon City, I worked on a few projects there,
Yep.
and along with Denise,
Yep.
and and that's pretty much it.
And
I have to concur with what he said, because yes, I have worked on projects
You
there.
left that out.
Yeah, I did leave that out, yes.
there was more.
Yes, there was more, yes, yes. I've done a number of applications for Willamette Falls Hospital in my previous life as a planner.
And I have had no ex parte contacts regarding this issue at hand, although I have had numerous opportunities to attend the hospital on, let's see, probably a dozen or more occasions. And I was also the architect on a couple of the projects there at one time, including the birth center.
That's the one I worked on,
It was some time ago.
only 26 years ago.
Is that all?
That's all.
Time really flies.
I was supposed to have my child there, but it wasn't done in time.
Sorry. Does anyone in the audience have any questions of the commissioners on these disclosures? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Slyman.
You'll have to come to the microphone, please.
Come on up, Stephanie.
Stephanie Slyman with Harper Hoff Peterson Regelis Inc. I'm the land use planner for the Providence Willamette Falls team. I just wanted to remind Ms. McGriff we had a second meeting with the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association following the first
Yeah,
required one.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I didn't hear that
Yeah.
one. So, thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Just
for
to
the
clarify what
commissioners?
that meeting was, I facilitated a meeting with some of the residents from the Trillium Park Homeowners Association, the hospital, and a couple of neighbors who lived nearby Willamette Falls.
Okay. One last chance. Okay, thank you. Who is giving the staff report?
Good evening.
Awesome.
Laura Terway, planner with the city. So as you know, this application is for Providence Willamette Falls Medical Center. There's 3 applications here, a master plan amendment, a zone change, as well as an amendment to our comprehensive plan. I'm going to go through each one separately. The first one is just to look at the site. The site's generally located near 15th and Division. The entire master plan boundary plus the area that's proposed for expansion is identified on the screen. The master plan was approved in 2012. It's a 2011 master plan file. This is the identified in orange is the boundaries of the 2011 or 12 master plan boundary. The applicant has proposed to amend that master plan with 3 different items. The first item is to expand the master plan boundary. The location of the expansion is identified in red on the screen. There are 2 different properties, one on 15th and one on 16th. They're both about a ½ acre each. There is a series of 5 houses located on those properties. One of them has nothing on it. The expansion of the master plan boundary would total about an acre, and it would be to accommodate a future medical office building and associated parking. So we'll get into it in a little bit, but this green square right there is from the 2011-12 master plan, which identified a medical office building there.
Which square?
This one on the bottom. Let me
Okay,
see
yeah,
if I
your
can
little
do
thing's not showing up,
Kelly's
the
little
red
bit.
dot's not showing up on the, on our screen.
Well, changed to mouse.
No.
Well, it was a hand.
That was the mouse.
Yeah,
It was a little hand, it was not a mouse.
doesn't work that way in PowerPoint, apparently.
Darn. Okay, so.
So anyway, on that side of Division Street, there was land that was in the previous master plan. This expansion would expand that by about an acre to accommodate a use that was in the previous master plan. So that's the first one. The second amendment to the master plan is to look at that use. So medical office building. So in the previous master plan, there were 2 medical office buildings. You can see them identified on the screen. There was MOB 1 and 2 on both sides of Division Street. The applicant is proposing to consolidate it, so there is only 1 medical office building, not 2. and the size of the medical office building will be smaller. So the two that were in the previous approval were 20 to 25,000 square feet each. This new one is only going to be 30 to 35,000 square feet. So you're going to end up with a net reduction in the square footage for the Providence Willamette Falls Master Plan. The third amendment to the master plan is to revise the phasing. This is the phasing from the 2012 master plan. So essentially, there was 3 phases. One was to do a parking lot on Division Street. It used to be gravel. It has since been paved. That phase has been completed. So the second phase includes a variety of projects. You could see on the screen that there's little red squares associated with each of those projects. And then there was phase 3, which was the medical office buildings. So the applicant has proposed to change this phasing in the existing master plan to remove phase 3. And
Could you say that again? You said that way too fast.
The applicant has proposed to remove phase 3 of the master plan. So there would only be one more phase left, and that is phase 2. And phase 2 would include everything the previous phase 2 included, as well as the west medical office building, which again would be a smaller size than the previous ones. The timing of the master plan is not changing whatsoever. So before it went through 2021, it will still go through 21. But now the medical office buildings can occur earlier if they need to be. So anything within phase 2 can occur at any time, which is the same as it was before. But now this medical office building is in that as well. Are there any questions about the changes in the phasing or the amendments to the master plan? Yeah.
Just to be clear, on the 2 office buildings, that they were going to be 25,000 each.
Yeah.
And so 50,000 total. Now it's going to be 1 for 35,000.
Correct.
So what I'm not clear about is you got 2 MOBs with red circles on it. Which one is being taken out of the plan?
So,
East.
thank you. That's a good point of clarification. So the east MOB will be taken out of the plan, and the medical office building will be the west MOB, which will be on the other side of Division Street. So they had a west MOB in the previously approved master plan. Now, that's the only location for a medical office building in this master plan, and it will be slightly larger at 30 to 35,000 rather than 25,000.
And what's going where the east?
So no buildings will go there. They could put parking and things like that.
That would be nice.
That's phase 3.
So it's all phase 2 now. So rather than phase 3, it will everything left in the master plan will be phase 2, which are relatively smaller projects between now and 2021. All right, so that's the master plan amendment. The second request is for a zone change. The zone change is for about a half acre of properties identified in red, located at 1714 and 1716 16th Street. They're directly adjacent to the mixed-use employment zoning designation as well as the hospital boundary. And with that, they've also proposed to amend the comprehensive plan. The properties are currently zoned R6, which is within our low-density residential comprehensive plan designation. In order to switch to mixed-use employment, you also have to switch our comprehensive plan designation to mixed-use employment as well. So those are the 3 proposals: the master plan amendment, comp plan, and then zone change. We looked at a variety of approval criteria listed on the screen. We have a staff report provided with findings showing how staff believes the applicant does meet all the approval criteria with conditions. There's a couple conditions on there. Some of the things we looked at are our comprehensive plan and goals and policies within our comprehensive plan, citizen participation, efficient use of the land. They have a transit corridor there, so putting more efficient uses on transit corridors, provided at adequate public facilities and so forth. With that, we recommend approval with conditions. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Can you go back to the zoning one more. More.
A little bit slow.
And then one more. I just want to see the two maps. Okay. There was a shift, and I wasn't sure, but it's just a positioning shift. I wasn't sure if colors changed or what. Okay, thanks.
So let me ask a hypothetical question.
Yep.
So if there is land that's already planned and zoned that could accommodate the medical office building currently without having to go through a plan amendment and a zone change, what is the need to do that?
So in order to review the zone change and the comprehensive plan amendment, we looked at Chapter 1768 of our code and those criteria, which again referred to the comprehensive plan, which as a general statement looked at more efficient land, especially near residences and transit corridors and things like that. So we didn't look at a need analysis. We did provide a square footage of all of the land within the zoning designation. We know that there are 13,000 through 250 single-family homes in Oregon City, and that the reduction of 5, since there are 5 in this location, is less than 1% of that. So it is relatively minor compared to our capacity for single-family homes. As a percentage of the city, we have about 1%. I'm sorry, we have about 8% within the, or 3%. Within the mixed-use employment zoning designation, and you can tell in R6 we have a bit higher percentage as far as acreage goes and percentage of the city, and that's what we use to make that determination.
It sort of answered my question, but it didn't really answer the question.
So it was more or less just the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan as well as in our code, which reference the comprehensive plan.
Well, so I don't know exactly what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to understand is that if we have land that's already planned and zoned, could accommodate it right now today, and tomorrow, and in the future, then there doesn't seem to be a compelling case to change zoning for something to do the same thing in that location when you can already do it someplace else. It's already there. That's my conundrum.
Didn't find an approval criteria that required the applicant to explain a burden of need.
Well, I know why they need the building. I understand that. It has more to do with the location of the building.
I think there is a need for a need statement to justify the reduction in the amount of housing that's going to be used for the building of that building. And I think there is some truth or some importance in making the analysis on why you wouldn't use the existing space versus, regardless of how small the percentage is, that is still housing and it's affordable and all that. So I think that is.
Why do we need to add an acre and destroy 5 residences to add 10,000 square feet? That doesn't compute.
So
and make patients walk across the busy street.
For the acre, you can see on the screen there's the 2 red squares. They're each a half acre, and one is already in the mixed-use employment zoning designation, so it's really just a half acre of land from R6 going to MUE. The rest is in MUE, it's just coming into the master
But they're
plan
adding
boundary.
an acre to their master plan also.
Right.
So that's the other change. Why do they need to add an acre to their master plan when they're adding 10,000 square feet of...
Well, I think the onus is on the applicant in terms of need. We got state law backing that up. We haven't heard from them yet.
But we will.
Let's do that.
Sam, we'll get the question answered.
One more thing before I leave you. We did receive a few public comments that came in after we released the Planning Commission packet on October 30th. So they're in packets before you. There are also some in the back. There was some letters of support from the Oregon City Chamber as well as the Oregon City Business Alliance. There was a request for a continuance from the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. And there is also a comment from James Nisita, who also requested a continuance and identified a potential issue with the notice. Staff reviewed the potential issue that was brought up, and we don't believe that there is a potential issue with the notice. So, being this is the first
I didn't
evidentiary.
understand what the concern was.
I can talk about it.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Mr. Nacita raised an issue that the public notice did not include a reference to the statewide land use goals. The statewide land use goals apply to plan amendments to the extent that they're not automatically implemented by the comprehensive plan. So the biggest example of that is the transportation planning rule that's part of Goal 12 that says you can't significantly affect an intersection without mitigating for it. That is not in the city's comprehensive plan. So we've made findings in our staff report related to the transportation planning rule. And the analysis that Laura was citing about loss of residential units. That is required by the comprehensive plan, but also by Goal 10. The allegation Mr. Nacita is making is that the notice should have included the statewide planning goals. I took a look at the local code, and I believe the local code implements ORS 197-763-3C, which is the 197-763 are the quasi-judicial hearing procedures that you read at the beginning. And they state law specifies what kind of notice you have to provide and what must be included in the notice. And it says that you have to list the applicable criteria from the ordinance and the plan that apply to the application at issue. And there are a couple of cases, most notably Van Dyke versus Yamhill County, where LUBA has said that the notice needs to only include the applicable local criteria, not the statutory or administrative rule requirements. So I don't think there is a defect in the notice here.
Okay.
However,
That's the long answer to the short answer that Laura gave.
That's enough for me.
That's good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then also, since there will be continuance, I have a list of dates if later you want to identify which date it can be continued to.
Okay.
so a sentence disappeared in there. You started with, since this is the first evidentiary hearing, and then she interrupted. You left and there's been a continuance requested, it must be granted.
There you go.
Therefore, at some point, we will designate another date.
You said it so well.
Isn't he amazing? Anyway, I was a little bit confused with the stuff that you handed out because it looks like I got 2 copies of the letter to the Planning Commission, and there was another one to the City Commission, and I was
Right.
really getting confused.
There are
but-
multiple attachments, so I included both attachments.
Okay.
And
We got
then
mul-
the
we
same
got-
letter was to Planning Commission and then City Commission.
There is, and I will ask the applicant this, I was trying to read the letter from the chamber, and I will specifically refer to paragraph 1, 2, 3, number 4 that starts with Providence, Willamette Falls realizes. And so there's a question in there that I'll have that says, additionally, Providence has created provisions for those who will need to relocate once the development is underway. And then there's a question, could Providence release an equal amount of land to what is being requested back to residential? So I'll be interested to hear a response to that. And I think, and one of the other submittals, somebody said that the neighborhood grew up around the hospital. I believe that the neighborhood was already there because it's part of Buena Vista, and the hospital came after. The original hospital's in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and it's on John Q. Adams and 6th. That was the beginnings of Willamette Falls down there, but I don't think the hospital appeared and then the neighborhood appeared. So I think that was a little bit, historically, a little erroneous in terms of a timeline.
Okay. You done with the staff report?
Thank you very much.
Very good. At this time, we will hear from the applicant.
Thank you for the clarifications, Laura.
Chair Kidwell, I'll be assisting with some of the timing, so maybe you would like to remind folks 15 minutes for the applicant, 5 minutes for neighborhood association, 3 minutes for citizens who wish to testify, and 5 minutes for the applicant to rebut would be what we are going to hopefully try to stick by tonight.
Very well stated. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll try to be
Did you
nice.
bring your air horn?
No, he's not bringing an air horn.
No, I have something that's very effective.
Do you want me to turn on my timer that goes wah, wah, wah?
That's what mine does.
Oh, okay.
The lights will get you as well up front.
Welcome back.
Hello again. Once again, I'm Stephanie Slyman with Harper Hoff Peterson Regelis. I'm the land use planner with Providence Willamette Falls Hospital tonight to present this proposal for your consideration. With me is Sherry Paris, the hospital's Chief Operating Officer. We also have staff here from Providence at your disposal to, if you have questions that go of a deeper nature. We have Jeff West, who is the Regional Director of Real Estate and Development, Sam Dutton, who is Construction Project Manager, Renee King, who is the Communications Director for Providence Willamette Falls, and Josh Kohlberg, who is the architect with PKA Architects, who also was involved with the initial approval of the master plan. So he has a lot of the institutional knowledge of the original approval. Before I introduce Sherry, who is going to talk about the overall, the background, the justification, the rationale for this request, I just wanted to recap at its core what we're asking tonight of you. And first it is, as you've heard, to expand the master plan boundary. There are 6 properties that are all owned by Providence Willamette Falls, 4 of which are already zoned for mixed-use employment. They happen to be still currently in use as housing. Providence has left it that way because they have had no immediate plans until now. So it is Providence housing zoned for MUE. There are 2 properties, however, as you can see, that are not yet zoned to be allowed for medical office uses, and the purpose of this proposal is to bring them into the boundary and zone them appropriately. Josh Kohlberg from PK Architects is going to speak more to the rationale for that. And I know Denise asked about a needs analysis. As Laura said, the approval criteria do not require a needs analysis per se, other than to demonstrate that the city's inventory of residential land is not being harmed by this proposal. I think we've shown that's de minimis on the surface. It's 1 acre. It's 6 houses. We understand, though, that of course the neighborhood is interested and concerned, so we're here tonight to address those concerns. And then Josh Kohlberg, who will come up after Sherry, will speak more about the site planning analysis so you can understand. So with that, Sherry.
Thank you for having us tonight. Again, I'm Sherry Paris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I think I'm supposed to say my address.
No.
I don't have to do that? Okay, great. I'd like to start by really apologizing for Russ Reinhardt, who's our Chief Executive and has been with the hospital for over 20 years, who was planning on being here tonight but was unable to make it due to a family emergency. So many of you have experienced Providence Willamette Falls Medical Center either as a patient or a visitor. You've mentioned that tonight. I want to share with you a few things that you may not know. We recently celebrated our 60th anniversary in the community, and there's been a lot of change since the hospital was first established by 5 local physicians. Today, Providence employs 650 caregivers in clean, high-wage jobs and has over 500 providers who are credentialed within our ministry. We expect to have cared for more than 30,000 patients in our emergency department this year. We average 48 inpatients a day, and we deliver more than 1,000 babies each year, bringing a lot of joy to new moms and dads in the community. Donations to Providence Willamette Falls Medical Foundation in 2014 were over $200,000, $223,000, and about 9% of that actually came from our own employees. The foundation supports the hospital in numerous ways. Recently founded a MetaMatch program to bring us 3D mammography, which is a tomosynthesis mammography that improves early breast cancer detection for women in the community. So that's just a little bit about us. And we have had and will continue our commitment to be a good community partner, and that feeling is long and deeply held. In 2014, we recorded over $10.5 million in community benefit, which includes free and reduced cost patient care. For over a decade, we've donated space to the Children's Center, which serves children who are believed to have experienced mental, physical, and sexual abuse. When the Children's Center outgrew their space, we donated land to them for them to build a new building. We donate annually to the Oregon City's Farmers Market to help families who are on the SNAP program bring fresh fruit and vegetables. We support the community with numerous sponsorships, including concerts in the park, the Clackamas Cove Triathlon, drug and alcohol-free graduation parties for local high schools, and would sponsor the new kids space at the first city celebration. So far as what brings us here today, as Oregon City and Clackamas County grows, Willamette Falls is caring for more and more people, as you would expect, and we're continuing to plan for responsible growth to meet the community's needs. The existing medical office buildings on our campus are full. We have physicians and services who want to work here in the new proposed building, and that would expand access to primary care, specialty care, and provide better outpatient services for our patients. And the planned medical office building on the northwest corner of 15th and Division adds less overall, as we've already mentioned, square footage than what our master plan allows for, and is reducing the overall impact to the neighborhood. And one last thing I really want to call out, because I know it's important to us all, and we've certainly heard that from the Neighborhood Association in the 3 meetings that we've had with them. The hospital really recognizes that there are unique challenges in being a mixed commercial and residential community. One of those big challenges is parking. Several years ago, we implemented a parking hotline and have really tried to share that with the neighborhood to report vehicles that are blocking driveways or parked inappropriately. Some of the other things we've done to address those concerns is if we brought valet parking back, actually started today, to ease the ways of patients and visitors on our campus. And then employees who are parked on our community streets are certainly cited by our security team and are notified to their manager and managed accordingly. So the zoning and master plan changes that we're requesting have continued the thoughtful planning and with the plan to have easily accessible parking where patients and visitors we feel like need it most. So thank you for your time.
I'll ask Josh Kohlberg to come up and speak more to the site planning considerations.
Hi, my name is Josh Kohlberg with PKA Architects. Like Stephanie mentioned, I can talk briefly about the decision that we looked at over the past year, east versus west. As you know, the existing master plan has in it current approval for development, like Laura said, of 2 up to 25,000 square foot medical office buildings, one on the east and one on the west. Sometime over this past year, the hospital came to us and said, when we look at our strategic goals over the next 10 years, we don't need that much space. We could really better utilize one building of between 30 and 35,000 square feet. And so we started to take a look at where would that fit the best. And I think one of the biggest considerations is the requirements for off-street parking. The city has parking ratio requirements for medical office of between 2.7 and 3.33 cars per 1,000 square feet. So if you're going to build a 30,000 square foot medical office building, you need to be able to park 81 to 100 cars on your site to make that work. If you look at the sites, at the property that they own on the east and on the west, the space that they own on the east side, and I have a pointer, but I don't want you to turn around and look, but on the east side of Division, where that current new parking lot was built a couple years ago, and then the space behind that is roughly 55,000 square feet. The area on the west of Division Street, if this proposal were to be accepted, is around 77,000 square feet. So there's more area to work with to be able to fit the parking to get that 81 to 100 cars to be able to park off-street. And I think that was a big consideration. One of the biggest considerations here was to be able to develop a building that met their goals in terms of square footage, that 30 to 35,000 square feet, and then also have the site size so you can allocate the off-street parking and the landscaping requirements and so on. And so that's why the west side was more favorable. In addition, the east side is bordered on one side by Penn Lane and one side by Davis. Penn Lane has some significant grade changes. There wouldn't be an opportunity to access the site from Penn Lane, so you'd be only able to access from Davis. The other side, you could potentially access the site from either 15th or 16th, depending upon how that site laid out. Also, 30,000 square feet on the east side, again, would require that 81 to 100 cars. And if you look at that parking lot that's there now, that's 40 cars. And so it wouldn't be preferable to then ask half of the people that would be attending that building to park across the street, either on the west or somewhere on the hospital campus. This way, on the west side, we can meet those parking requirements and have all off-street parking handled in one location.
Does that include the
Or the
4
employees.
new buildings that are already on the MUE side, or does that
No,
that
that
require
just-
you to have those 2 little buildings added
That-
on 16th?
What I'm referring to is the area that they own contiguously between 15th and 16th.
Okay, so just that block, with or without including those 2 properties that you want added to the.
With.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm more or less concerned with is, and I'm going to take your word for it because you're testifying, you consider this to be an improvement in terms of efficiency to the site for to serve your customers. It goes without saying, but
That's correct. Yeah, and somebody else can ring in as well, but it would be optimal that a patient who's coming to this building, which likely is to house primary care and perhaps rehab and so on, that they would be able to park in the place adjacent to the building and not be forced to cross the street or something like that. And this site on the west really presents itself the best opportunity for that.
so is this outpatient type of service?
Correct.
And how many patients per day would you anticipate providing service for?
That's a good question. Sherry, perhaps you know, or somebody, roughly 30,000 square feet of primary care plus rehab. I don't have a good sense for how many patients per day that is, but it's definitely outpatient use. It's people coming for primary care appointment or just had a knee surgery across the street and they're coming back for a rehab, something like that.
So on-site parking is essential for people that are on crutches,
Correct.
so they don't have to cross over division.
Correct.
So where are the people who are going to be employed there parking?
Well, that parking ratio assumes use both for patients and for staff.
So they'll both be in that lot?
Perhaps, yes, although
We can certainly direct them otherwise if that becomes an issue. We have a lot more direction with, obviously, our employees than we would, with our patients as far as where they park. And we may ask them to actually park on the other side of the street just to make sure we have enough patient parking. If that becomes a concern, we can certainly do that.
Well, I think, for example, other hospital complexes in our vicinity, and I say Portland metro area, may require you go to building A and then you're on the same campus and then you go to building B for something else and maybe building C for the third thing. So everything seems to be within a certain distance, but you're only anticipating that people are going to be at that one building and may not need to go to another building.
Correct.
And
Based on the tenants we're looking at today.
Yeah, I mean, I know, let's just anticipate that the public is the public and they may get in their car and go from that building and go across the street to another building. But yeah, I mean, as you know, the big issue has a lot to do with, yes, you can control to some extent your own employees, but there are the people that are coming. So I had some questions, and I don't know whether you'll be able to answer them. I've been looking at the transportation impact analysis, and there was a statement in here that said the 2011 employee commute options survey results represents a slight increase in the drive alone mode. And then it says Willamette Falls is making efforts to reduce the drive alone rate, which will continue to lessen both parking and traffic impacts. So what are those efforts and how will they result in a decrease in parking impacts? It seems like it's a statement that's out there kind of, I don't have any data to back up that statement and what that means. And then it says further that they're recommending you continue to monitor the situation about neighborhood parking. I think you're going to need to do something more than just monitor it. And I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say that maybe it needs to be more enforced, and I know you guys drive around and you've got the hotline number, but any time of the day that I've been up there, there's a lot more cars on the streets by the neighborhoods than I know that's not the residents parking there. There can't be that many people per home.
So if I could just address the parking overall to clarify. So Providence Willamette Falls, as a mixed-use employment medical center, has what's called a blended parking rate. So there's medical offices which are generate more parking. There's other office space that generates lower. And so the campus as a whole needs to meet a minimum of 2.0 spaces per 1,000 square feet of net leasable area. So it becomes blended across the area, across the campus. We know that the MOB specifically is one of the higher generators that goes into that blending, which is part of the need to site the parking associated with that use with it, to co-locate it on the west side of the street where there is enough room to make that happen without impinging upon other parking that shifts the problem elsewhere. And to Denise's point, Providence has been working with its employees to monitor the parking and enforce the parking. I know that policies have been were drafted that were turned in with the original master plan. The parking for this update there would be less parking required because the square footage is going down. That said, it's not to diminish the parking concerns, but one of the conditions of approval that Providence accepts is that at the point that the detailed development plan for the medical office building comes in, that's when all of the specific parking spaces will be quantified and the specific policies to enforce it will be made, will go into effect. So what we're asking you at this level, we're showing that yes, it's possible to meet that 2.0 minimum across the board. We would like to meet it in this certain location, and there are traffic demand management techniques that Providence could employ to even reduce that parking below what's needed. So
some of the other efforts to I don't know if this will totally answer your question, Denise, but some of the other things that we're doing besides just our policy enforcement for our staff in the event that they should park in an inappropriate place, those are taken very seriously. We do offer TriMet passes to all of our employees free of charge that they receive annually. We do have a proposal with our foundation to create a biking storage area to try to encourage people who live closer to be able to bike into work. And then we did just start the valet parking, which we think will help with some of our visitors as well. We're certainly not the only company that's up on the hill. There's several other agencies as well that offer business in that area, but we're trying to do the best that we can to mitigate the parking needs on the community.
So what about some of the recommendations that are in the transportation impact analysis on page? There's a recommendation about adequate site distance, reducing the parking demand to 1.95 spaces, talking about how Oregon City and should work together to do X, Y, and Z in there.
So you're referring to the original TIA that we submitted to show how the parking was calculated initially?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the specific question?
I was just saying there's a number of recommendations in here that the consultant from
Kittleson and
Kittleson,
Associates.
yes,
Those recommendations are if Providence were to look to reduce the parking even further, how that could be accomplished. Providence is not proposing to reduce the parking below 2.0 per 1,000 with this application.
And I'll just try to get them all out at once. So I was looking at the dimensional standards for the zoning district that currently exists. And so what is the anticipated height of the proposed MOB building?
Right. Josh can speak to some of those specifics, but I guess the caveat being that building has not yet been designed other than the general massing that needs to be achieved with that site.
So what are you thinking about?
So Josh says 2 stories.
2 stories, okay. I'm not going to hold you to that, but I'm just trying to get in my head what we're talking about, because the maximum building height could be 3 stories. That's all I have
Anything
for
else?
now.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I wrote lots of notes.
Yep,
Okay.
I got one.
You do.
Parking. Hey, what a surprise. Since you're now not building the other structure, couldn't you have more parking over there that which would diminish the face of parking into the neighborhood?
It certainly provides an area where more parking supply can be provided that's counted across the board. If you would just bear with me for a moment, I know that one of our exhibits that we submitted with the application,
Very thick one.
Laura, do you know which one that is? I know it's one of the last ones. If it's handy.
The parking exhibit, is that what you're
Yeah.
looking for? I can bring it up in a moment.
Yes, figure 7. So Josh took a look at where existing parking is and for the proposed expansion where parking could be accommodated. The area where that MOB would go away is an area that could accommodate some of the parking supply. So I would venture to say it's not an area that's going to be left landscaped without any sort of purpose. So as the overall parking is taken into consideration, that is an area that Providence could look at to provide it.
Yeah, because what's going on in my brain is you're looking at 60 spots, assuming 30,000 square feet. You're looking at 60 spots. Easily that footprint of the building that isn't being built could accommodate 30. I know you're going to probably need 30 or 40 in front of the building just for patients. I mean, if you fill it up with doctors, you're going to one doctor, one patient at least. But it decreases the footprint, and I guess where I'm coming from is, I'm a planning commissioner and I can wear both hats, but Division Street is called Division Street because it's a division. It separates neighborhoods, and it separates, to a large extent, commercial, the whole frontage of medical buildings and apartment complexes from single-family residential. And, that's the way the city planned it. That's why when you drive down Division, it's Lincoln on this side and Aluria on this side, because it's two different places. And I'm concerned, and this is something that you heard at the meeting, so this isn't a big surprise. I'm just kind of voicing it so everybody else knows what was kind of said out there. So you add these two buildings, but then in 10 years you buy the other 4 or 5 buildings on the block. So, you need to build something else, and so you move the MUC or the MUE zoning down a little further. And then, we need a radiology center, so the other block that you've been slowly building, you add that, and slowly but steadily the single-family residential thing turns into massive Providence 20-story, you look at what's happening on Gleason Street. It's a very large edifice right next to a residential area, and I know to a large extent you're trying to avoid going up and becoming large and edificey by going out a little bit. But that's the concern in the neighborhood, and one of the conditions in there, which the planning staff said you met, which was goal 2.4, which is neighborhood livability, and keeping the characters of the neighborhoods. Come on, the other way. I'm concerned, and I think that gets to that needs analysis. Why do you need so much on this side when you've got a vacant hole for parking, and why do you need to absorb more neighborhood into into the zoning?
I think you're talking about 2.7, which says, this proposal is consistent with the policy by reinforcing the role of the hospital in the community and focusing growth in an established location, which will promote vibrancy and access to care while remaining compatible with the surrounding residential area.
I'm actually looking at 2.4, which says provide a sense of place and identity for residents by protecting and maintaining neighborhoods as a basic unit of community life.
Obviously, that needs to be balanced against the
I
understand,
additional
and that's why
medical
I'm
care
saying
in a growing
there's
community.
already enough MUE there's already, I just don't see the need to move the line. If I was on the planning commission when the zoning was adopted, I'd be arguing that the zoning shouldn't have crossed the street except for that one already existing medical. But that it's there, I understand that. I'm
in my mind,
loath
I
to
think
move
the
line.
argument's already been done during that time when the policy was considered, when that area was
And the line
expanded.
specifically doesn't
So-
go any further down the block, which it does on every other street. It specifically excludes those buildings. So they didn't go down to Pierce or whatever that street is and across. So there must have been a reason. I'm sorry, you're getting drug into a discussion. So anyway, sorry.
Let's hold that for the discussion, since we're going to continue it anyway.
Okay, any other questions
So
for the
response to
applicant?
that, because they had a couple questions about sort of why, or do you want us to hold those?
Sure, go ahead.
I guess, you can speak to it, Stephanie, more from kind of a planning perspective, but just from the hospital's perspective, I would just call out that there is already a building on that site. It's not necessarily the most nice to look at and sightly building. So there is already a use there. There's already parking there that is existing today. Some of the factors that we're taking in consideration are just the natural traffic patterns that people do. There's a lot of activity at the front of the hospital. We don't foresee that changing, and so rather than it continue to be sort of a mixed bag of activity at that intersection, to have it be more intentional, that combined with the use of the land itself is one of the reasons why we're looking at this site and have made this proposal. Stephanie, I don't know if you can speak to that from more of a planning kind of perspective, but
Certainly,
it's
and
the
I
hospital's
guess what
perspective.
came to mind is what you acknowledged at the end, is that the city has already contemplated and mapped and zoned this area for mixed-use employment, and this is a minor addition to that in order to accommodate what Providence feels is better site planning to serve its patients and the community at large. So from a planning perspective. And secondly, the fear of when does it end, where does it stop? This master plan sunsets in 2021, or it's completed in 2021. So beyond that, Providence would have to come back for approval for a new master plan, at which time there would be a public process just like this. So it's not just a slippery slope where it keeps being added to. In this case, Providence has come back for an amendment that actually reduces its impacts while slightly increasing its boundary for the reasons that we've belabored at this point. So the thought of it continuing onward, again, it's in the city's hands as to how it would treat a future application. All we can tell you right now is what we're here tonight to propose.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we will hear comments from the public. And the first person that I have signed up to speak is Jay Pierce. And just a reminder, especially with the number of people we have to testify tonight, we'll be limiting your time to 3 minutes.
I'll be brief. My name is Jay Pierce. I reside at 1214 Washington Street, which is within the McLaughlin Historic District, and I'm a resident and a property owner there. I'm here to speak in favor of the amendment to both the master plan and zoning for this area, strictly because I believe that Providence has and will continue to provide excellent medical services here, and specifically this will be a rehab facility. At least part of its use will be a rehab facility. If they'd have an excellent surgical service at this hospital, and if your parent or your grandparent or your brother or your sister is having a procedure done that requires rehab, physical therapy follow-up, I want it to be done here in Milwaukee rather than having to drive either to St. Vincent or Providence, Portland. This facility is going to go in somewhere within Providence no matter what happens. So I would prefer that it be here. I believe they have planned in the parking. They own the buildings that they're going to be dealing with here. I've always known Providence to deal fairly with their tenants. And these buildings will not detract, in my view, the minimal amount of impact they're going to have will not detract from the amount of housing available either on the hilltop or in the McLaughlin district itself. So I would speak in favor of granting this, approving this amendment.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person I have to speak, and I'm not sure, Tiffany
Muma.
Muma? Okay.
Got to print.
Well, there's lots of up M's and
Yeah, there's
U's
a lot
and
of-
M's.
About that.
Oh,
A lot
no,
of-
that's-
a lot of
Choice
loops
in
there.
that one. My name is Tiffany Moomaw. I live at 1810 14th Street, which is a block and a half away from the emergency room at Willamette Falls.
You don't need to give us your address.
That's
It's on
okay,
your
I'm happy
card.
to do it. I
Well,
want you
just
to know where I
for
live.
everybody, yeah.
I've lived in this neighborhood for 11 years. Well, actually 13 years. I've lived at that location for 11 years. I own my home there. I've been walking this process with Willamette Falls Hospital both before and after Providence acquired the property. And I have been a fan of what they have done and appreciated the development in the neighborhood on the whole. I also think it's a lovely idea to improve the existing property, whether or not that includes adding those the property those houses exist on. It's obviously up to you, but I'm here to say that I do not appreciate the addition of the properties along 15th in the other block, which is hard to point it out, but
16th, yeah.
it's no 15th. Into inclusion into the master plan. I feel like it encroaches into the continuity of the neighborhood, disrupts the continuity of the neighborhood, and would very likely have a traffic impact on the side streets, which are already difficult to navigate, as well as the streets that lead up to Division, their configuration. The angle at which they approach Division Street makes it difficult to safely get in and out of there. So reducing traffic there is important to me. There are a lot of children that are there. I think in lieu of that, the hospital has ample property to develop away from that site. And I know we just heard someone talk about the slope that the hospital exists on, or some of the property exists on, but I would just point at OHSU, which has a lot of slopes, and they managed to figure out how to get their patients into parking and have adequate access to the facilities via elevators and so forth. So I am just simply opposing that one portion, that
The four properties on 15th?
the four properties being brought into the master plan, the ones that aren't already currently a part of the master plan there. So I just wanted to say that.
Just real quick, any comment on the two properties on 16th?
I think right now, I mean, this is certainly just opinion, but based on our housing needs and how many people I know in the general area that have been looking for housing and not being able to get it, it's always to me a little bit sad that we're reducing the number of houses. However, because there is already an existing office building there, which is in poor shape, and the property itself could be improved a great deal, I don't have a lot of opposition to it. Also, it has access on 15th and Division, and it doesn't principally block into the neighborhood.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
okay, that's fine. Yeah.
It's a very thin part of the neighborhood that wraps around that one area where I'm talking about, and to bring business into that area, it doesn't allow for the neighborhood to feel contiguous from one section to another. So that's my opposition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The last person I have signed up for this item is James Nisita.
Thank you, James Nacita. I live in Oregon City. Mr. Chair, could I make a request that, so everybody could see it up on the screen and you can see it on your screen, that OCMC 17.68.020 be put up on the screen, please?
That would be Laura's job.
Sure.
What was the citation again?
OCMC 17.68.020.
Thank you, Carrie.
Does this start? When does this start? It's set.
Once it's up and you're ready.
When
to
it
begin.
turns green.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good. You're not losing time.
All right.
Almost there.
Oh my goodness. Yes, folks, this is our interactive website.
This is the time for the musical interlude, Paul, if you're ready to sing that song.
I was just starting to practice.
Okay, all right.
I need my pitch pipe.
Or somebody could do the Jeopardy thing.
The Jeopardy thing, that's exactly what I was thinking.
See, who says that being on the Planning Commission is not all about fun?
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. So I just wanted to point out 17.68.02 as far as the criteria. Notice the introductory sentence. The criteria for a zone change are set forth as follows. It does not say the criteria for a zone change and a comprehensive plan amendment are set forth as follows.
I asked that same question earlier.
Okay. The criteria for comprehensive plan amendments are, as I stated in my email, they are the statewide planning goals. I made copies at the law library tonight of the CLE on land use so you could have some more cases on when direct goal compliance is required. It's long-standing LUBA law and case law and statutory law that when you amend your comprehensive plans, you comply directly with the goals and you give complete goal compliance findings, and you have to have substantial evidence in the record. And if you look at item D, statewide planning goals shall be addressed if the comprehensive plan does not contain specific policies or provisions which control the amendment. That's for a zone change. It sounded to me that whatever case the assistant city attorney was citing was talking about this concept. It wasn't talking about what's required for a comp plan amendment. So I maintain my position that you have to comply with comprehensive plan, with the statewide planning goals when you amend a comprehensive plan like you're doing tonight. I think to do otherwise, you run into a lot of problems with notice. You run into a Goal 1 problem. Goal 1 states, the citizen involvement program shall provide for continuity of citizen participation and information that enables citizens to identify and comprehend the land use the issues. Do you really expect your average citizen, when looking at one of these postings, if goal compliance isn't listed as a criteria, is going to know all the arcane ins and outs of Oregon land use law? That's absurd. At least, even if what Ms. Richter said was true, you should at least have in a notice that the goals may be approval criterion if your comprehensive plan and zoning code doesn't implement a provision of a goal. So I think you're on really shaky ground in not noticing comp plan amendments and at least giving some reference to the requirement or the likely requirement that you have to comply with a comprehensive plan. I didn't get a chance to talk about goals tonight. I'm only going to rely on what I've sent to you, my written testimony. But this applies to the next one, agenda item 2, and I'll just incorporate that by reference because I'm not going to spend my time repeating this. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have
Laura,
any other...
Laura, before...
Oh, sorry. I'll put it right back.
Tony, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think we're just going to bring up the 1768 zoning changes and amendments. Usually you think of an amendment as to an amendment to your comprehensive plan. Initiation of the amendment, a text amendment to this title or the comprehensive plan, or an amendment to the zoning map or the comprehensive plan map may be initiated by. So while I would agree that 1768-020 could be more specific in terms of applying just to the zone change, this is the process that we've used for comprehensive plan amendments. So I believe that the process we followed was correctly, as well as the notice that was provided, as the city attorney, assistant city attorney discussed earlier.
Okay.
So Tony, I have a question.
Well, before we proceed, I just want to make sure we don't have anybody else that wants to testify.
Yes, we do.
We do?
Come on up.
Did you not fill out a card?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay, if you can come on up and introduce yourself.
And then she'll give you a card when you're done. Fill it out.
I'm Callie Edwards. I live on the corner of 15th and Division. I face the Willamette Falls Hospital. I've birthed 2 of my 4 children. I carry my kids across the street to get stitches. I go to the hospital for just about everything. My house is on the chopping block to become part of the parking lot. This has done undue stress once, twice this year. I was under the assumption my home was safe for the next 3 years just to have another sign put in front of it. This is very nerve-wracking for me. I am a single mom of 4 children. I love my home. I've been there for several years. This causes stress for my kids. I am not opposed for them changing the building across the street. I watch traffic every day. I watch the elderly people run through those stop signs. I don't think they should extend parking lot across the street. That's probably not safe because my kid's school bus pulls up right here. It's really scary when those people fly by because they don't stop at those stop signs that bus swings out for the preschoolers or the big kids. Quite honestly, it's terrifying. I think they could be more creative with parking structures. I think they could go up. Nobody parks in that parking structure in the back. Nobody knows it's there. As far as the rehab facility, I've got carpal tunnel scars. I've had rehab downstairs in the basement. It's a very emotional thing. My husband left. You know what Providence offered me? $1,000 in 4 months to find a new home. Do you know Portland has the highest rental rate? Where should I take my kids? Do you know my neighbor also has 4 children? Where she should take them and her new grandbaby? There are families in these homes, but I'm pretty sure all these nicely dressed people aren't concerned about where their Christmas will be. So, I know you guys all live in the neighborhood. Those signs terrify us. So, 2021, that's 6 years. I rented this home not knowing, my kids have only ever been in Holcomb. And I moved every year. I never went to school in the same school for 2 years. So it's been a struggle for me to keep all of my kids in the same place. My kids have all gone through the same Head Start, the same elementary school, and now I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 months. So I'm here tonight listening to things I don't know about and have never faced. And I don't know where we're going to be. And I don't know what $1,000 is going to do for us. And I don't know what any of this means, and I'm so sorry I'm getting emotional.
Okay.
But it's our livelihood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to have a rebuttal?
I think they talked about something to do with relocation, that would help.
Well, and we've also got a request for a continuance, so
Yes.
it may make sense for the applicant to rebut at the continued hearing. The record is open. I would expect that we'll get more written testimony during this open record period.
Okay.
So it's up to you, but you may decide it's more efficient to allow rebuttal
No, that,
when we return.
that's actually
And
a
certainly,
great idea.
questions, whatever you want to
Mr.
do.
Chair Kidwell, I don't think it's really so much rebuttal. I think Renee is standing there because she'd like to try to respond to what the hospital is proposing to do about the people who live in the houses. Am I correct? Yeah. I would really like to hear that.
Okay.
Commissioners, if you're okay with that.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Renee King with Communications at Providence Willamette Falls Medical Center. I've talked to Kelly a couple times and also talked with her case manager. I haven't talked to the other renters that are in that property. We really want to be thoughtful about the renters that are in the properties, and had let Kelly know and her case manager know that at any given time that we are ready to start actually doing something with the property, which we don't think is going to be until summertime, then we would make sure she had 4 months' notice at that point. So we're not looking to give anybody notice before Christmas time. And then we offered a moving allowance equivalent to 1 month's rent, and that's what she referenced there as well. And we did make sure her case manager knew about it as well. So we are trying to be thoughtful. I'm sorry the signs disturbed her. We've actually had some problems with, and these are signs required by the city for us to have up at certain points along the property line. We've actually had some vandalism. That's the sign. We've had some vandalism on the sign that was supposed to be up in front of her house. So I talked to Laura about could we move that sign to a different place. And I talked to Kelly, and she actually said, well, why don't you just put it on my fence? So we put it on our fence. So I'm really sorry that that's disturbed her. And we can move that sign off her fence tomorrow and move it to another part so it doesn't feel so intrusive on the rental property she's in.
So relocate, or you said there's a relocation allowance?
Yeah, we wanted to offer her a move allowance, absolutely. So if she has to, and that would be all of the renters that are in there. So if they need to rent a moving van or pay first month's rent, something like that, there would be an allowance for her to be able to do that.
I know this question is going to be quite a bit outside the purview, but any thought to helping some of those folks with maybe relocation services?
Actually, we have talked to our property management company about helping with that as well.
Yeah, I know that it was brought up before. It might only seem like 5 houses, but in terms of the affordable housing that's available in this community, there really are not a lot of single-family residential dwellings that are available, and to try to get, somebody with a lot of family members into an apartment, that's rough. I know when I was moving here to look for a place to live, it was really hard, and that was 26 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just me and my spouse, and we still had a hard time trying to find an apartment. We finally did, but it's tough. So in the big picture, 5 houses in the whole city, not a big deal. 5 houses in McLaughlin, maybe more of a big deal, because again, there's not that many houses for rent. There's not houses that can accommodate families. It's tough. And I've talked to some of the realtors that I know in this area, and if I was looking for a house to rent, they said it's tough, very tough.
Yeah, no, and our property management company is already prepared to be able to assist that. I don't think the other 2 houses are rentals. I don't know if they are. Do you know? I don't know if they are rentals.
But thank you for that. It's for the average person, to be honest with you, when they see those blue signs, people who don't deal with this all the time, they have no idea what it is. They don't know. They really don't.
Although they do seem to
Okay.
be a target for vandals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen
Yeah.
that.
And the weather.
Yeah.
And I think I'm getting more from Laura tonight to replace them. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
Tony, you started to talk to us about the code issue. Did you have anything else to add to that?
Not at this time. I think just more of housekeeping on the continuance and what the options would be available to the commission.
So we would be keeping the record open and continuing to, do we have a date?
So right now, we're looking at the 23rd of November is our next Planning Commission meeting. On that date, you have Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan hearing as well as the Cove work session. What we're wondering is we could either add this to the list, start at our normal time. We could advertise this to start at 6 o'clock if the planning commissioners were available. We could continue it to the date certain, start at 6 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock, or try to find an alternative date. We'd prefer to send it to a date certain tonight so we don't have to renotice. So realistically, go
I
ahead,
think
Laura.
that one of those items is going to get bumped from the 23rd if we schedule them all on one night.
Or it's
If
gonna
we're
be
willing
at
to
2
stomach
a.m.
that, that's fine.
I'm not
but
meeting till 2
I would
a.m.
think that this night should be scheduled to an alternative.
What about the, Laura had talked about a special meeting on the 30th.
So I polled the commission, and it looks like we would have enough people for a quorum, both if we were to start at 6 rather than 7 on the 23rd, or if we had a special hearing on November 30th, which is the Monday following that, so it's not a regularly scheduled meeting date.
Could we push the work session? I really don't want to have a work session on the same night that we have public hearings.
I agree.
It just doesn't work. Could we push the work session to
The 30th.
maybe the 30th instead? I hate to have you guys come out again, but, you know, when you're in hearing mode, you're in hearing mode. When you're in work session mode, that's a different mindset that you're thinking about something.
And then we
And
wouldn't have to have.
Right.
The
And-
work session for the Cove is on the notice. We sent the work session date out, so we could do a continuance at the hearing, but it would still appear on the agenda item nonetheless.
how do you guys feel about that, moving the work session
Yeah,
item?
My
That would-
preference would be not to try to squeeze an additional item on the 23rd.
I agree.
If we could move something to the 30th.
Well, you're already going to have, your other zone change tonight has a request for continuance. So both of them are first evidentiary hearings. So we need to, so I guess just think about that in terms of the next one is going to be continued as well.
I think would be to take these two items and move them to the 30th and just
Yeah.
deal with them.
Yeah.
And leave the 23rd alone.
Yeah, I agree.
The difference about the items on the 23rd too is that they're legislative. I mean, you've got a work session, but you've also got Beaver Creek Concept Plan legislative decision-making, which is a little different than what we're doing here.
Right.
So do I hear
So-
consensus for the
Do we have
30th?
consensus for the 30th?
So I move that we continue this hearing and leave the public record open until November 30th.
And that's at 7 o'clock.
Correct.
7, okay.
All right.
So before we close it now, because I don't bring my email with me, so what do we have scheduled for the 23rd?
Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan and a work session on the Cove.
And
And that's-
potentially Heritage Tree?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what?
A heritage tree amendment. That's
At 7.
That's a lot. Ugh.
Yep.
Okay.
So I made a motion.
Are we in
Is there a
agreement?
second?
Is there a second?
I don't know.
Commissioner
Zach, second.
Sorry? Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin? Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
You can
I don't
abstain.
know.
Just abstain.
I reluctantly.
And Chair Kidwell?
Aye,
Motion passes.
enthusiastically.
You don't have much of a choice is the problem.
Yes.
Okay, so this is continued
So
to
we can
November
wait till the last
30th. So
frickin'
any
minute.
written comments, anything? Sally Ford?
So it's just our luck. We go along and we don't have any stuff, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to slam to the last part of the
It's
year.
weird, like how the construction season seems to drive these. It's-
Couldn't you have planned these retroactively?
Yeah.
I will try better in the future.
Oh yeah, Tony has total control over that.
Do we want to take 5 minutes, or is everybody
Please,
good?
yes.
Yeah, let's
yeah.
take 5 minutes.
Thank you.
I'm going to put this in my calendar. Get a free pass.
I think we're fairly confident that everyone is here, has been here, and they've heard the
spiel.
The spiel. I think you can start with opening the public hearing and the ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, site visit.
Let me hear it again.
So do
Discussion.
any of the commissioners have ex parte contacts?
We'll start with Bob this time.
Bob? No. No ex parte contacts, no nothing. Okay?
You're sticking with that answer.
Okay, right.
No ex parte contacts, and I'm familiar with the site.
I haven't had any ex parte contacts.
No ex parte contacts. I'm familiar with the site. I actually kind of toured it when the bus barn issue was coming up. This is the old bus barn site, so I kind of looked at it at that point. But I haven't since this came up.
Likewise, I have been to the site because of a previous land use application, and I will declare for the record that I've had no ex parte contacts, but I know the principals of historic properties and have known them for as long as I have lived here. But we have not discussed this application.
And I have had mic's off. I've had no ex parte contacts, and I am familiar with the vicinity of the site. I have not visited the site for this application. Laura, do we have a staff report? Well, actually, does anybody in the audience have questions for the commissioners regarding the disclosures?
I didn't have a baby there, though.
Seeing none?
I was going to ask.
Thank you very much. Laura Torway, planner with the city. The city received this application for a zone change and amendment to our comprehensive plan. The subject site is about 16.5 acres, located approximately by Beaver Creek Road, Highway 213, and Maple Lane Road, as shown on the screen. You can tell that there are a lot of residential homes nearby, as well as some shopping centers and other commercial amenities. See if we can get this to work.
We're just a happy bunch.
All right. So there's two applications. Again, the zone change and master plan amendment. The zone change.
A master plan amendment?
Sorry, the concept, or the Oregon City Comprehensive
They
Plan.
all start looking alike.
They do.
Yes.
Thank you for that correction. The property is currently within a variety of zoning designations, as you can see on the map. So it's within R10 zoning designation, which is single-family residential, 10,000 square foot minimum. R6, also single-family residential, but a 6,000 square foot minimum. And bits of it are within R3.5, which is a residential dwelling district on a 3,500 square foot minimum per unit. So it's a bit of a mixed bag as far as the zoning goes. The applicant has proposed to change the zoning designation to MUC2, which is a mixed-use corridor. In addition, the applicant has proposed to amend the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. Even though there are 3 zoning designations, 2 of them fall within the same low-density residential comprehensive plan designation. So both R10 and R6 are both within that. The R3.5 zoning designation is within our medium-density residential comprehensive plan designation. As the applicant is proposing to change the zoning designation to mixed-use corridor 2, they will also have to amend the comprehensive plan to mixed-use corridor. The applicant has proposed some limitations with their zone change and comprehensive plan amendment. So specifically in the mixed-use corridor 2 zoning designations, we have a menu of uses, and applicants can choose whatever it is that they want off this menu. The applicant has proposed to limit some of those uses. So it would be uses that they would not be able to choose for the subject site when it develops further down the road. At this point, they're just asking for zone change and amendment to the comprehensive plan amendment. No uses at this time, and no development at this time either. The applicant is cognizant of the transportation impacts of the zone change, and so one of the methods that they've used to mitigate or limit those impacts is to take the list of permitted uses and conditional uses within the MUC2 zoning designation and cross off ones that are maybe a little bit higher in transportation impacts. So they will, as development occurs, they'll come back for additional review, but the list of uses will be smaller for these properties specifically. Staff has proposed a condition of approval identifying the uses which cannot be pursued on site. The second limitation is that they've proposed to limit the transportation impact or the automobile trips generated from the subject site. So what they've done is figured out if the site was developed as a permitted use, how many automobile trips would that be? And then they've taken that number and said, when development occurs in the future, it will not exceed that amount of automobile trips. So we figured it out for the morning and then also for the afternoon. So AM peak and PM peak. So there is no increase in automobile traffic beyond what would be allowed should they build a permitted use. Are there any questions about this trip cap?
Which comprehensive plan designation are we talking about?
It's a good question. So both of them.
Well, you can't take one from column A and one from column B and call it good.
So what the applicant did was they designed a subdivision, which would be a permitted use within all of the menu of zoning designations that are there now. And in our staff report, we also reviewed the subdivision to see if it was likely to comply with our subdivision criteria, lot width, lot depth, streets, things like that. And so the applicant, I want to be very clear, is not proposing to do a subdivision, and the approval or whatever decision you make is not a land division. This is just to help us understand how many trips would be on the site as a permitted use. So we're ignoring the uses that are there now if it was just to develop as permitted.
Would this be worst case? Because I know that MUC or the corridor plan would allow for like commercial uses that would generate more traffic.
So we just figured out what would be a reasonable transportation impact under the existing use today. So they maybe could have squeaked some extra something in there. Our code does allow different ways in which you could maybe increase the density as a permitted use slightly, but they took a moderate approach. So a subdivision under R10, R6, R3.5, all the lots meet the dimensional standards, the streets meet whatever our street requirements are, and then it resulted in 107 lots. So they took 107 lots, and as permitted, we allow accessory dwelling units, and so they accounted for 107 accessory dwelling units as well. And those two together equal a maximum of 128 AM peak hour trips and 168 PM peak hour trips. So what they've said is when development occurs in the future, that is the most that you can have. If, as this property develops, and we're not really sure how that will be because there's no master plan with it, we would review each application and we would take these totals of 128 and 168, and each application that comes in, we would reduce it by the amount that's proposed, and that's what the applicant has to work with. If they wanted to amend that trip cap or lift the trip cap in the future, they would have to go through a process to amend the zone change to do so. They also submitted a site plan showing an R3.5 lot with an ADU attached. So you can kind of see, like, how does this physically fit on this lot? And that's in the record as well. I just didn't put it on this PowerPoint. Are there any questions about the trip cap and how they calculate it and why? So the overall result would be a no impact for transportation. We would look at transportation quite a bit when they come back to do actual development, which is required in our code and chapter.
So I guess
4.
you just distribute the concomitant amount or the allotment of trips for each use.
So we
proposed use.
Yep.
But then, like how so oftentimes, and I've run up into situations like this where we've had a conditional zone change, which I'm not real crazy about, where you end up having a use that ends up using up all the trips, and then you have a piece of property that has it's all out of trips, and you have this property that you can't really develop because you've used all the trips for the other part of the development, and then you have this situation where you have a lot that, you can't really provide for transportation, so.
Right, so it's up to the
It's just a concern more
property
than a
owner.
question, yeah.
Mhm.
So the trip count that you're talking about is theoretical, or is it based on current use?
It's based on the zoning designation. So the current use has a variety of other zoning designations, not all single-family houses. So it's based off this subdivision layout, which is existing zoning designation. So if you were to pretend that nothing was there and they were going to fully develop at a reasonable level under the current zoning designation, how many trips would that be?
So I guess my question, before you get to that point, is based on current use of the property, what is the current trip count?
I can defer to the applicant to that.
Okay.
So in our scenario,
Okay.
we completely ignored the current uses. We
Okay.
didn't add them to this. We just took it as a clean slate.
We'll talk to the applicant about that.
Yeah.
I've got a question for Carrie. Carrie, I see what the applicant's trying to do, and it's creative, but is it legal? Because we're dealing with some variables here that aren't definitive. I mean, I see where the staff has gone in trying to put a ceiling on these trips, but how are you going to control that other than get out there with a traffic counter?
Well, we often control trips based on what the traffic engineers tell us what the trips will be. So really, this is no different than really an assigned number of trips that we give to a particular use, right? And we don't actually go out and count to make sure that's exactly right, but that's the way the traffic engineering is done. I mean, where staff has looked at, staff's position on this in terms of is it legal, it starts and ends with the transportation planning rule. You can't have a significant effect on an intersection. The permitted uses out there is this subdivision, right? Right now, they can go build this subdivision and generate that many trips. So our view was if we capped the trips and allowed changed uses, we will not have a significant effect on the intersection. That's how we've deemed it legal.
Okay.
As for what that does in terms of leaving remnant pieces that have no trips, I'm gonna work with Laura to draft a condition that requires the recording of a covenant to put future property owners on notice that there is a trip cap in place, and that getting approval for subsequent uses, depending on when they come in, could require modification of that trip cap before they could get the land use approval that they need.
Yeah, because these zone changes get archived for years, and then.
Well, and they could be subdivided, and we can't control who owns the property.
Right.
Well, I
So-
guess the thing
So we're hearing what you're saying about that, and Laura and I are going to work on that.
In line with what Paul's saying, though, is there a way to, with conditions, require like a shadow plat or some way of controlling that development like a master plan to prevent the first guy that kicks the can from using
Take up all the
more
trips.
than his share of the trips?
Or her.
Or her.
So that is a great question. We have a condition of approval that's proposed that says when the first development comes in, we want to see what this place will look like when it's done. So you will have to show us what the streets will look like, what all the dedications will be needed everywhere. And then, so identify the improvements. We know that it needs a street through the middle because that's part of our code requirements. So where is that going and which portions of that is this first phase working on? And so what is the phasing plan for the transportation system nearby? And then also, who's paying for it? So they have to identify feasible financing for those as well. So we want to make sure that even though it's not in a master plan, that we think about this in a thoughtful way. So with the first development, they'll have to do a few things. One, they have to really look at that transportation system and those impacts and all of the projects identified in our code and our transportation system plan. And then two is, what is the worst case scenario for development of the site? What are our improvements that are required by our code? And how will those be phased in? So there will be, in a sense, a phasing plan for transportation.
Are you going to amend the recommendation of conditions of approval to reflect that?
Nope, so it's in condition of approval number 3.
Number 3?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I guess here's my, everybody gets one stupid question per meeting, so I'm going to use mine up right now.
No, this is the second one.
Is it the second one? Which one? What was my first one?
I forgot.
You forgot? The staff is comfortable with a sort of, I see this as sort of an empty vessel. You're comfortable with approving something that we don't know what it is, with some future conditions that go off into, who knows, you're here. I don't know if I'm here. I'm completely perplexed by this.
Well, they're putting all the weight on condition number 3 for that.
Well, no, I mean, we don't know what, is it going to be a tire store and a fire station and
It's definitely an unusual way of doing something, but I'll wait and hold the rest of my inquiring minds want to know questions when the applicant gets up here, because I am not really sure about anything, and I thought it was very interesting that you made findings that says it appears to comply.
Because I want to make
I
it
don't
clear,
know what that means.
we are not approving a subdivision.
I don't know what that means.
We are not approving a subdivision.
No,
I didn't want
I-
to mislead anybody in any particular way. This is just, it could be referred to as a throwaway plat, or something where they're they're going the extra step, and the city is going the extra step to make sure that these numbers that we have for trips are right and
I
they're
would've
feasible.
Love to have been in on
But-
the pre-application conferences.
Doesn't the proposed zoning allow for other things other than single family?
It does.
Okay, then why wouldn't there be a mix of single family and other things that the proposed zones are requesting?
Is this a trick?
I mean, I guess I'm just not convinced that I'm seeing the reasonable worst case based on just single family.
I'm not either.
I would think that there would be more impact associated with commercial zone.
So we picked a reasonable case development for the existing zoning designation,
Yeah.
and there is different things that you could do which would make more trips, but the applicant
Yeah.
chose a
I
method.
mean, I get what
that's
you
more-
did with the plat. I
Yeah, yeah.
understand that. I know that you're not really going to do that, but I'm just, I've struggled with this, to be honest with you, as a planner, when people have come in for zone changes in my shop or our shop where they have a mixed use of zoning, things that allow zoning for single family, commercial, and all that other kind of stuff. And it's hard because we do want to tell them, you need to plan for the worst case scenario. You need to do a traffic study to show the worst case, the most amount of trips that this zone will allow. Like the commercial zone, you know, you can have a gym, you can have a McDonald's, you can have all
Mhm.
sorts of other things. And we go to McDonald's because that's usually like the largest trip generator.
So when
So
they do their traffic study with the first phase of development, we will look at a reasonable worst-case scenario based on the permitted uses that are allowed, that are left. So they cross them off the table, so we're not considering restaurants because it's not a permitted use.
I guess that's what's bothering me a little bit.
Is it allowed? I
I'm
don't
sorry,
see it
but
on the
it,
list.
usually we look at that when the zone change happens as opposed to subsequent development.
The other thing
see
too
it
is
on
that
there at all.
our code tells us the design of
This is a
roadways.
zone change. Right, right, but I feel like I'm being told that we're going to look at it later. We're going to look at the traffic impacts. We're getting a general idea of what the traffic impacts now. Approve the zone change, and then we're going to focus down and narrow down the focus on traffic impacts later.
But you're putting in a hard cap. You are putting in a number that has to be
Yeah.
met based off the ITE manual, based on the square footages and the proposed uses. It's so it actually provides more clarity because it sets a line that says you cannot generate more than X trips.
But it's the cap is still based on a soft number. It's based on a soft use, if you will.
But
Because
it's
of
all
that.
zoned residential.
Right.
So
Which I would consider a soft use as compared to what a typical worst case scenario use would be in that zone, in the MUC's corridor zone.
but it's zoned residential. We're setting the base off of R10,
Yeah.
R6, and R3.5.
Okay.
Right. So that generates what was the number, Laura?
128, 168.
So that generates those two numbers. We could zone it whatever we want.
Yeah.
And those are the numbers that matter. We could zone it industrial, we could zone it, commercial. It does put a limitation on what
Okay.
the trip generation can be. It sets a hard cap that says whatever you do on this property, it cannot exceed those two numbers during the AM and PM peak.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if I was a firm believer in the ITE manual, I'd feel more comfortable with that, but I'm not. I don't.
Well, until we come up with a better tool that's
I know.
that's universally accepted and stands up in court.
I totally understand that. I totally
it's the
understand
one we
that.
have.
I've been dealing with that document for years, and I still have many, many, many questions about it.
Well, I think, what you've done with the combination of the conditions really does cover those conditions, but it puts a tremendous onus on item number 3, because we
What
don't,
page are
we
you
don't.
on, Charles?
He's
This
on
is.
condition of
Two.
approval.
Conditions of approval.
Be like the second page, maybe, of the staff report.
I think items 1, 2, and 4 are pretty straightforward. Item 3, we're basically saying that the applicant has to come back and demonstrate that the development meets the criteria before they can start doing anything.
And we'll go through a public review process, so there will be public comments. So in theory, this would happen when they want to build a building. And so we would go through our site plan design review process, and it would be open to the public and available for comment.
So without
But
calling
that's
it a master plan, you're basically requiring them to come forward with something resembling a master plan.
The only thing that's going to be predetermined, though, are the transportation impacts. We still won't know what the other uses are going to be, and they're not analyzing the utility systems all at once and the parking counts all at once and things like that. It's just what are the public street improvements going to be, who's going to pay for them, and how are they going to be phased.
I think Laura just hit the nail right on the head, and we haven't discussed this as a planning commission to come up with any policies other than the transportation plan. Is what role is the public going to play in the improvement of some of these streets when the capacity has been reached? Is the public going to require the developer bear the brunt of these improvements, or is the public going to pitch in and widen that road and improve that intersection? And this is, we've always sidestepped that issue. We haven't really gone at it head on.
Well, I disagree with that, because we've always had that argument of, gee, my development's the one that triggered having to put in streetlights, so I guess I won't build that development because I don't want to be the one that has to pay for the streetlights. Or traffic lights, I guess, isn't appropriate.
Yeah, traffic.
So, to a certain extent, this exercise and the trip counts and all that shows that it's when you apply it through, and we've fought this whole issue of Maple Lane, Holly, Thayer, that this whole traffic congestion zone here because of how much is happening. We now have a number, 128, 168, that we can plug through the traffic impact of the intersections and determine, is this development site going to be responsible for traffic light changes, intersection reconfigurations, impact. I don't know if we can make the impact go down to Holly Lane, but we now know where, with those numbers, what does this do to the traffic pattern, and in a way, can in some cases be proactive. You know, just like in front of Safeway, the old Walmart property, there's a light there. No, you know, I don't know anybody pulling out of the Walmart property that needs that red light in front of Safeway, but it's there, it's ready. You know, and the same on the other end of it, over by the Bi-Mart property, the light's there, it's ready. You know, the configuration says, hey, when you're putting in this half-street improvement, put the little holes in the ground so you can put the loops in for the stoplights, and you know, so whereas if it's and you know, I look at it, I go, who the hell did 3.5 zoning for this spot? But it's there. You know, if it isn't coming in as a shadow master plan, then you know, that could end up happening. You know, a guy could put in his 6 little houses, and he could put in his 5 little houses, and then suddenly, yep, now the guy's got to, you know, put in street or stoplights and rebuild an intersection, and so nothing happens. Now there's a condition 3 says, plan for it, make each section pay their portion of it, so when the triggers hit, the funding's there, or has already happened and it's retro funding, you know. I mean, that's what I see 3 saying. Is that your intent with 3?
Exactly right.
Okay.
And so the way I'm reading this, we set the cap at 168, 128, but that doesn't preclude a future development coming in and saying that they're actually going to have less trips.
Right. So if the property owner wants to parcel out his trips in whatever way that they see fit, one phase comes in and it's under the cap. With the first phase, we'll have a lot to work to do to figure out what our transportation impacts are. But when the second phase comes in, we will keep these conditions of approval and also the recording of the covenant that identifies the trip cap, and we'll just keep subtracting uses as they come in and as development gets approved and goes through the process. And the cap will stay there until they remove it. And they may not.
And it might be, you don't get to build your building yet because we have to fix the intersection as part of your development, and then you can build your building.
So they'll do the associated traffic studies to figure that out.
But you've already kind of done the traffic studies because you already know what your max impact is going to be. So developers know at each step, oop, I'm the trigger, it's no.
If they build to the max.
Realistically, let's say we come up with a fix for 213 Beaver Creek Road. I could see a situation where they come in and say, can we have the zoning that with the additional trips, right? So essentially we're capping it at the existing condition right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's just important to remember is that the tool to kind of say, is this a reasonable assumption for the AM and PM trips, is what that was intended to do, to set a baseline.
Based on existing
Based on the
conditions.
existing zoning, correct.
And so what, I guess my question is, since I don't see anything here from the Oregon Department of Transportation, being a non-transportation person, I should guess that this intersection is at a level of service Z, whatever that is, which is the worst. It is a, well, I don't drive it very often, but when I do, it is, so what does this pretend cap do to that intersection currently today? I just see the stuff from John, and that's not helping me. What does ODOT say about it? Because I can't imagine that they're going to, you know, they're going to just roll over on this. I apologize, gentlemen. I'm just having a very hard time wrapping my head around this, and I'm sorry. So
Don't be sorry.
I
think you're being realistic.
I don't get it.
Actually, you're talking to somebody that sits and waits for that light at least twice every day.
Oh, yeah.
In one direction.
Yeah.
2 cycles.
Yeah, 2 cycles every day.
Yeah, I know it's not.
I would say that intersection's already at F.
Well, it's beyond F. That's why I said it's at level of service Z, because I've seen it, and it's not. Yeah, let's just hear from the applicant. That may just resolve all of my questions, and that would be wonderful.
That's right.
And so we have talked to ODOT, as you can imagine, quite a bit. They did submit something into the public record that was just talking about right-of-way, but since there is no transportation impact at this time, we're not getting right-of-way, or we're not asking to exact right-of-way at this point. So ODOT has been in the process quite
Consulted.
a bit. Mm-hmm.
I'd really like to know
To say the least.
what they say about this. It may or may not sway me, but I would really like to have that information.
Would you like me to finish?
Yes. There's more.
So we took a look at the approval criteria. We looked at the criteria for subdivisions, even though it's not a subdivision, just to understand if the layout appears to be reasonable. And we concluded that it did. We took some excerpt zone change criteria. Again, we're looking at the comprehensive plan and what are our goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, including citizen participation, efficient use of land, putting mixed use developments near transit corridors, and having adequate public facilities as well.
What's the transit corridor?
There is a policy in
No. Where is the transit corridor?
Beaver Creek Road. Or Highway 213 does carry. And Beaver Creek Road, there's a transit stop at the intersection of Beaver Creek and 213, sort of by Forest Ridge Apartments. So it's very close to transit.
Okay. And if this developed, I'm sure they'd be putting one like in Maple.
So we do believe it meets the policies of the comprehensive plan because it would provide ample opportunity for jobs or residences or whatever it ends up being close to other amenities within the city, and it is near a transit corridor. So with that, we recommend approval with conditions.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll hear from the applicant. Better late than never, huh?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Dan Fowler, and I'd like to introduce my business partner, Mark Foley, and Tom Sissel's here with Sissel Engineering, Lloyd Hill from Hill Architects, and Mike Gard is here with me from Lancaster Engineering, our traffic consultant. It's interesting listening to the discussion because everybody views these things through their lens, and I want to give you an idea of what our lens was in looking at this land and the process that we've been undertaking to get to this night. Historic Properties started assembling this property 8.5 years ago, believe it or not, and people have always said, well, how come this hasn't developed? Fractured ownership was the biggest cause. In the process of assembling the land, we've dealt with a church, the school district, as you're aware of, several property owners, ODOT, and the city. We're now in control of the land, all of the parcels, so we're here tonight seeking the comp plan amendment and zone change. The lens that we looked at this is we really wanted to be a good neighbor. We want to do the right thing. We don't want to over traffic the area. And so we were the ones that proposed these concepts of limiting the development and capping the transportation on ourselves. We're imposing that on ourselves. And we're in agreement with the conditions, and we're in agreement with the added condition of recording that so that if it goes beyond us, it stays with the land. You got to the conclusion that we, I think where we are at, we took, in our minds it was fairly simple. We wanted to take away retail, we wanted to take away high traffic generators as even an option in the future. We don't want the neighborhood or ourselves to be worried about, oh, they're just telling us they're going to do this, but they're going to really come in later and put in a drive-through or fast food. No, we're not. We're eliminating those uses from the uses that are even going to be allowed in the future. So something happened to Mark and I and somebody inherits his property, those conditions remain on this proposal. So that was the concept behind limiting the uses. And partly it was done too to be realistic about how do we have a decent development and live with the cap. The cap in our minds was fairly simple. We took the existing zoning, 3.5, 6, and 10. We analyzed how many, we laid out a conceptual subdivision. We didn't take the most conservative approach or the most liberal approach. We weren't trying to just seek all the trips we could get. We were trying to be realistic all the way through. We spent a lot of time laying out the subdivision of what could happen under the codes that are existing in the city to come up with a legitimate, defendable AM and PM trips if we built it under the current zoning. Under the current zoning there is today. And we said to ourselves, we are not going to exceed that number in the future. What we wanted to say to ourselves and the neighborhood and everything is we're not going to make it any worse by this zone change than it could be today. That's the concept that we viewed it under. What does that do? That puts a big burden on us. Okay, we have to seek the uses, and believe me, you might not like the manual, the little chart that the traffic counts. I've got it memorized because that has to determine my users. Now, how can we be so confident we're going to live with that cap? We're going to be in soon with our first development proposal. We're prepared to show not only the street system, but we will show the utility system. We will show that it's going to work. We will get the comments that we need from that. And we've met with the neighborhood twice. We even shared with the neighborhood already what the first proposed use is. We've talked about that to them. So we are proposing uses that will stay within that trip cap, and I'm confident we can do that. I don't want to sit here tonight and say we've got a purchase and sale agreement on 3 of the lots. I can't do that. I don't even have it platted yet. But I have users that will allow us to live with the trip caps that we're imposing on that land. And again, the burden's on us. If it falls apart, we have to live with that cap. I appreciate, the concern, like what happens? Well, believe me, I've thought about that too, because I'm the one out here, and Mark and I, that have worked on this thing 8.5 years. Believe me, we're concerned about what happens if. We're confident that we can live with that cap. We see a development that involves some senior housing, and assisted living and memory care, some live-work houses, maybe near the green space, a possible hotel site. We've ran the numbers. We know the sizes that we're looking for. We know the trips that those generate per thousand. But the point that we want to make is we are not going to exceed the trips that it could be built today. Now, unless, like Tony said, unless the intersection gets fixed, there's more trips, we would have to come back in and apply and try to get those at that time. But we're confident that we can even do it without that. I'll let Mike maybe try to clarify anything that I haven't muddied up yet or that you might have already been discussing in terms of the traffic. Okay.
All right, so to start with, Mike Ard with Lancaster Engineering. I'm the traffic consultant that's worked on this project for, I don't know how long it's been, but we've worked at it from multiple angles over a protracted period of time, and we have worked very closely with ODOT, with Clackamas County, and with city staff, and have had several meetings, even ones that have included your assistant city attorney, in providing some direction about what is possible and ways to potentially move forward with this project. When we first looked at it, we did look at it with an unrestricted zoning, and we realized that there could be very high traffic impacts associated with that. And as we looked at that and the potential impacts on Highway 213 at Beaver Creek Road, we came to the conclusion that ODOT and the city didn't have great answers yet in terms of what does that intersection look like in the future, or even more fundamentally, what are the standards we're going to use to evaluate that in the future. And the muddiness of those questions put us in a position where we really couldn't get to firm answers. with that in mind, the only way that we could reasonably move forward with this project was by showing that we did not impact the intersection at the planning horizon. And in the staff presentation, there was a slide that I think very succinctly summed that up, that showed 3 green bubbles. One that shows the existing allowed trips is equal to the proposed allowed trips, which means there is no increase in traffic from the zone change. That is the principle that ODOT was looking at when they reviewed this application and the trip cap, and it's the reason that you're not seeing a formal comment from ODOT as far as they're concerned. This has no impact to comment on. We did get a comment back from Clackamas County, actually 2 little nitpicks about the way that we did our analysis, both of which they said, we think you could have had more trips under the existing zoning, and you could probably set that trip cap a little bit higher than you did. We did revise based on one of the comments that they made, and we didn't account for the other one. I think the difference that it turned out to be was somewhere around six or seven trips during the PM peak hour. A very, very minor change that we thought made sense, and it also seemed to be their code requirements, so we wanted to match up with what they had to say. But Clackamas County has a significant stake in this too. They're concerned very much about the ability of Maple Lane Road to serve future development that's outside of the city, and there are intersections in there that we have to plan for. Maple Lane at Holly Lane, and Maple Lane at Beaver Creek, and of course Beaver Creek at 213. Those are all intersections that are extremely high on people's radar. In terms of the Highway 213 at Beaver Creek Road intersection, I've done some operational analysis of that intersection, and I came up with a nonsensical result that there's more traffic squeezing through there right now than what can physically fit.
You think?
Now, it's not possible to put 3 pounds of beans into a 2.5 pound bag, but we're seeing that sort of phenomenon occurring right there at that intersection right now, and what it means is I have to recalibrate my analysis and try and figure out how it is that we're getting the 3 pounds of beans into the sack.
Would you call that a failed intersection?
It's certainly not meeting the current performance standards. The performance standards are under flux, though, right now, and there are provisions under Oregon's rules now that allow for mitigation for other modes to promote non-single motorist vehicle traffic, essentially, and trying to get us into a position where we're growing smarter and not just growing our intersections bigger, which leads to congestion again, it leads to wider intersection crossings for pedestrians, and it leads ultimately to safety problems. So we want to be cognizant of that, and ODOT wants to be cognizant of that. So we've tried to approach this in a way that makes sense and in a way that really limits our impacts and is smart, and that's what you're seeing there in that green, is we want to make sure that we're not making that situation any worse. Now, that does leave some questions that push off toward the future, and those are the questions that condition number 3 is meant to answer. So I heard the comment that this is kind of an empty vessel and we don't know what's going in. I'd point out that zoning is, by definition, an empty vessel. You describe what can go into the vessel, and that's the point of this exercise, is we looked at what's allowed in the vessel under the existing zoning, we counted the beans that can go in, and then we went to the new zoning and we said, okay, well, actually that might be more beans, but we're going to make it so that it can't be any more than it is under the existing condition. So it's a relatively simple and straightforward solution as compared to trying to get through the what are the standards going to be for that intersection of 213 at Beaver Creek, which is really a legislative decision that may be years out in terms of coming to an agreement with ODOT and would prevent us, of course, from moving forward until it gets resolved. So we just wanted a relatively simple mechanism for doing that, and that mechanism is existing equals future, and it's no change. So with that said, the condition 3 definitely is going to allow us to move forward in a way that is smart. The thing that I like about it is that it allows us to plan our local street network in a way that accounts for the traffic that could occur on that site. So we don't build a road that's too small or dedicate right-of-way that's not sufficient. and then come back later and have to take out a wing of a building because we needed a bigger road. We're planning for that in advance as required. I don't know if Dan wanted to get into a discussion of what any of those uses are, and maybe you're constrained about that.
I mentioned a few.
Oh, well, you said you've mentioned a few to the neighborhood association. But
I rattled off a few.
We'll say it again.
Well,
We
I
may
think
not have
our
been
first
listening.
use that we're going to be coming into the city is an independent senior living.
We heard that.
The second would be an assisted living and memory care. Third may be a type of a rehab center. And then we're hoping, and we have some interest, we're hoping to be to bring a hotel to the Hilltop area. And there's some interest in that. Depending upon the trip cap that's left, the small section closest to the land that Metro owns for green space, those 3 lots across the street, we may do some live work housing in that area, 8 or 9 units. So that's our little flex. That's our little flex thing, space over there. But I think, and we've analyzed the size of each of those. We've analyzed the square footage and the criteria for the trip cap, and we can stay within the 168 with those uses.
The one other thing that I'll add is that there's a bit of irony in the way that this is being envisioned for the phasing, in that the concern is we don't want to use up all the trips in advance and not have anything left for the last piece of property. And the way that I see this going, as Dan's planned it out, is we're not using up the trips, and it's hard to use up all the trips at the end with the low-intensity uses that he's proposing at the outset. But we are, I think, moving in a direction that's going to be comfortable for us in the future and comfortable for the neighborhood and the city as well.
Dan, I have a question for you. You say you haven't platted this, but as you parcel it out, change the lot lines here, can those caps go with the property so that in CC&Rs, is that what I'm looking for?
What it's hard to designate it per property because we're still negotiating on some of these on which site they go. So it's hard at the point of platting to cap it, to put a certain number on that lot. What we like is the fact that there's a cap for the project, and then the burden is on us to make sure that it's allocated as the users come in, and we do that through that development process.
So do you see that being implemented with the issuance of a building permit?
Yeah, we would show the traffic cap, with each development that comes in. Yeah, and it'd be accounted for.
I just, for the record and the audience, I just want to be clear. When you say no more traffic, it's no more traffic than could be already there.
Correct.
You are going to add trips. There is going to be more traffic, but no more than already is possible. And that's the distinction when you say no new traffic.
Pretty close when you think about all of the drivers and the buses and things that come in there right now.
Yeah, the buses that used to
We're
come
not
and
too
go
far
are-
off of our
yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
That
today.
was actually a question I had started to ask Laura. Do you have a comparative trip count based on the church?
In the church.
And the
Yeah, the
bus?
church is a mostly Sunday
It's a Sunday.
use,
Right.
so it's hard to look at what that is in terms of the impact of this development.
But you have
Normally-
the church and the bus.
Yeah, normally we're looking at weekday traffic volumes, though. So the church is not a significant contributor under existing conditions. For the PM peak hour, the bus barn, off the top of my head, it seems like it's in the range of 70 trips, including the buses and the cars that are going in and out of there during the peak hour. Although I'd have to look
That's
back at my
about what it
data
was
to
when we did
to
the bus
be-
barn work.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then
it's in that range, and then of course there's some residential uses.
Housing in the
there
church,
as
you
well, in
count
the
some of the
church.
office space. So, we might be 90 to 100 trips today. And I'm not trying to be false in the number, but we may be about that today.
Somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So, Mike, I think you're underestimating. Churches now are becoming more multifaceted. They don't just have services on Sundays.
That's absolutely
They're
true.
doing all sorts of other things, and I live
And it's very much dependent
in a
on which church
neighborhood
it is, too.
of 4 to 5 churches, and there's something going on there every single day. So they're
Which
doing.
would make our trips today more than what we maybe
Yeah.
said. So we're going to we're probably less today, to your point, Damon, we're probably less than the 168, but we're saying no more than what could be.
Right.
Right. Yeah, there's also a little bit of a distinction in terms of the analysis. When we're talking about a zone change, we're typically looking out 20 years into the future at what traffic conditions look like then with full build out under either zoning. When we talk about having gone through the zone change process and we're looking at our actual impacts, we're looking at the year that we complete them. So we're talking about mitigating for our impacts, not for somebody else that's going to come on after and increase traffic further.
Just as a slight correction, we're talking about a comprehensive plan amendment.
And
the
zone change.
The zone change is not the only thing we're talking about
Correct,
here.
yes.
And a comprehensive plan amendment is the one where we're supposed to be looking out into the future. If the property was already comp planned, you'd then be changing the zoning, but you're not. So here's the question: why do you need the MUC?
It gives us the allowed uses, the designation for the MUC2. Is that what your question is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gives us the right to get the uses we want for the property.
Because you're talking about, I'm assuming you're talking about some assisted living or independent senior living. Are you talking about a Willamette View Manor type situation? Not tall, but I mean, you're talking about Mary's Woods. I mean, those are the ones that are, those are the developments that seem to be in the future. And 2 weeks ago in the Oregonian, they had a whole section about, look at all these new assisted living, retirement living, independent living places, and they were pretty large. I mean,
The
again,
first
the baby
phase will be
boomer,
about 120 units.
baby boomers are coming.
3-story near the intersection and slopes down to where it'll be daylighted to 4. I mean, and we've showed a beginning rendering of that to the neighborhood a couple weeks ago, and we're going to schedule a pre-app hopefully before the end of this week.
So what else are you thinking about? For not specifically, but in general.
That's a lot with
Yeah.
assisted living in a hotel, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's
There'll be 4 parcels in the main body of the land, and then depending on how we do for the
So
residential piece.
why didn't you just say that in the application and then plan for those uses?
Because they're not
He doesn't have
firm.
a signed
I can't.
piece.
I have to get a zone change done,
Plan amendment.
a plan amendment and zone change done, and get it platted so I can firm up. I can't even enter into firm agreements. I have letters of interest, but you
Yeah,
can't
letters
move
letters of intent. Yeah,
Yeah,
I get
there's
it.
a letter of intent is not as strong as a purchase sale agreement, but by law you can't sell something that's not platted.
That's what
So-
I understand.
Well,
I think the other thing that I'll say is, in looking at this, when the very first time we met with the neighborhood association, because if you look at this, the land use and where our thoughts were in the beginning, it's a beautiful subdivision moving to a very busy intersection when you have retail across the street. So, when we said, well, what is the right uses for that area? What would go in there? We asked the neighborhood at the first meeting, would any of you like us to build you a home down near the intersection? Because that's what it's zoned today. Nobody said yes. So the current zoning we thought wasn't right. So we thought, well, what is a nice transitional use that fits moving from a nice subdivision towards the retail? The uses that I described, we think and feel are very good transitional uses that move from residential to commercial.
Well,
And we didn't want to put retail in there because I don't think it's the right use. There's too much traffic in the neighborhood. That's why we eliminated those from the list. We don't want that there. We don't think it's the right use.
One thing that I'm looking forward to is you've got a plan, which means development will happen, which means things like sidewalks will happen.
Regional trail systems will happen.
I don't care about that.
It's a good thing from my perspective.
Well,
that's good.
Well, in relation to that, because to me, I'm a teacher, well, substitute, but so I'm at Ogden and driving up Holly to come up, to like Freddy's or whatever, and I see the kids walking inches away from traffic, and I'm sure we're going to hear about Holly and everything, and the idea that they're going to have at least through this part, and it's a
Absolutely.
start, and it's going to happen soon that they will have safe sidewalks and crosswalks. It's infinitely better than somebody developing bits and bits, and
Absolutely.
and you see down in the developed part of town,
Oh, yes.
sidewalk, and then nothing, and then sidewalk, and and it's just like
There was,
So-
I couldn't agree more. I advocated for sidewalks when I sat on that side of this bench years ago. I couldn't agree more.
It's hard, yeah. Well, Damon's going to need that for his
Okay.
motorized
Any other
wheelchair.
questions?
Yeah.
He's going to need
Okay,
the sidewalks.
we need to wrap this up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thanks, you guys.
We may be back.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So at this time, we'll hear from the people that have signed up to speak. The first person is Bob Nelson.
Thank you. I'm Bob Nelson, and it had to been 8, maybe 10 years ago that I was working on the Beaver Creek Master Plan, and we started talking with Nancy Krushauer about landslides and landslide mapping and problems, and it was going to be no problem for the city to come up with landslide ordinances. We still don't have them. So the problem I have here, and I have a handout in front of you. In the handout in front of you, you notice where the green line is. That is Maple Lane Court. Notice the proximity to the red circle. That is a mapped landslide. Okay, the back of those lots are within feet of that mapped landslide.
You're referring to the 3 lots on the other side of
The
it.
3 lots on the north side of Maple Lane Court.
Right.
Part that Metro.
Okay. So we have that problem. We also have the problem that when developments go in, infiltration retention ponds must be built. If you look at the blue dots that are on this plan, are current infiltration reservoirs or points.
Detention
So here we're
ponds.
concentrating a tremendous amount of water that goes into the soil at the top end of, look at the landslides that are down below it. Across the road, less than a quarter mile away, it's about 1,300 feet, is an active landslide. That's the apartment complex. What I'm trying to say is let's don't make the same mistakes. The back page lists the 2013, this is a map done again by the Oregon Department of Geology
And mineral industry.
Dugami.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it all.
Yes.
Anyway, I tried drawing in the plot that they're going to develop there, and the red areas are the highest susceptible land for landslides, which does include a significant portion of that corner and all of what's across the street. And so, you've heard, we're talking about beans, and they're talking about putting beans in the pot or a vessel. There's a weak spot in this development, and nobody's talking about the landslides. That weak spot is 213, and that very large landslide that could be triggered by construction or could be triggered by adding more water. And I think the city really needs to put this on hold until it can develop effective and useful landslide ordinances. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark. You don't have a good tool to use here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the maps. It's very useful.
Yep.
And James Nacita.
But wait, there's more.
This is a different one.
It's the same text with a different heading on it.
I'll pass around. Thank you.
So, in 3 minutes, I am going to talk about goals this time. I just want to reiterate in summary that I believe that the goals have to be complied with directly noticed, and to not do so, in addition to violating statute, violates Goal 1, which requires information that enables citizens to identify and comprehend the issues. I'm sorry. So I just want to go through, I didn't have the time since I spent so much time on whether you guys had to comply with the goals to prepare more written comments on goals. So I will, just to preserve the issue, make some oral comments. I'm concerned about this development because of the presence of Newell Creek. Newell Creek runs along Beaver Creek Road. It is the headwaters. It's in the headwaters of Newell Creek, and the maps in the design show stormwater discharges into Newell Creek. For that reasons, I think Goal 6 is applicable. The stormwater discharge system will be a disposal system under ORS 468B. It requires a permit from the Department of Environmental Quality by law. I don't know whether, in fact, DEQ is actually issuing discharge permits for disposal systems of this size. That needs something to be sorted out. But if DEQ is not, then there's another provision of the water quality statute. Even if they don't need a permit, they must still comply with state water quality standards under 468B 025 subsection 1. Goal 5 is implicated. Fish and wildlife areas must be protected. Stream flow and water level should be protected and managed at a level of adequate for fish and wildlife pollution, abatement, and recreation aesthetics. We don't have any evidence in the record right now as to what is the water quality of Newell Creek. Is it exceeding water quality standards already? Is it violating water quality standards now? That needs to be in the record to decide whether you can continue discharging into the river or the creek under Goal 6. I'd like to raise another issue with Goal 7, and that is wildfires, which is mentioned in Goal 7. It's at the top of Newell Creek Canyon, a heavily forested area. Any forested area of this maturity is subject to wildfires. I was in Canyon City this summer viewing the Canyon Creek fire, and we don't want that visited on us here. And we need to make provisions for protection, especially if we're having a mobility challenged elderly population in an area that could be susceptible to wildfires. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Christine Kuzinski.
There should be an additional one as well for Elizabeth Grazer Lindsay.
That's what I have.
Paul probably stole it, so. My father-in-law drove from Springwater to up Maple Lane and Ferguson and all that for 25, almost 30 years. When I'm in the Hilltop and I need to go to their place, I go that way to that way. I can't believe how much traffic is down now.
Oh, yeah.
It's bad. People drive like bats out of hell.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a wide open country road.
Yeah, it's scary.
One of each of those and then one on this one on the side.
Hello, Christine.
Ready?
It's
Before
not-
you start my time, I would like to ask.
It's not quite all the way down here yet.
Yep, go ahead.
I would like to ask for a continuance of this hearing. My reasons are, I've given you 3 pages of testimony that in 3 minutes I could never give you. There's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns here, and I'm hoping that I get answers at the next meeting.
thing or different thing?
This one's different than, so.
I'll share with you. Can you share?
Yeah, I'm just making sure these, okay. So that's for Kristen. That's a whole packet. And looks like route, so.
I didn't have enough maps. I
That's
hope
fine.
you can share.
Okay, we'll share.
They were pretty spendy.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Those stars are really cool.
I'll explain those in a minute.
So we're sharing all this.
Yep. Okay, I think we've got everything distributed.
Okay, we're ready.
Christine Kaczynski, unincorporated Clackamas County. Because a comp plan amendment must be done for this zone change, the city must consider and meet the original state land use goals. I will show why the city cannot meet Goal 7, which is to reduce risk to people and property from natural hazards. Lloyd's of London is the only insurance company in the entire world underwriting catastrophic landslide insurance. My husband and I recently applied for landslide and earthquake insurance, and we were denied. The reason we were denied was the risk of 6 landslides, one of which lies beneath the old bus barn. The yellow star is where I live. There are blue stars in 4 other existing landslides. There is a red star right underneath the Newell Creek landslide. This is the landslide that goes under the apartments, under Highway 213, and up and over and underneath the bus barn. The denial of landslide insurance to us by the one and only insurer in the entire world means that no one living on the property of the old bus barn can get landslide insurance. The property is only good for bus storage, but not for people. I have testified to the city for years, telling you that people living on Holly Lane cannot get landslide insurance. And now I have written proof. Lloyd's of London will not insure any property owner for landslides if they live within 1 mile of a previous landslide. This city has been approving development after development in landslide areas. New owners are not notified by the city that they're in a landslide zone. And by the way, you can't get insurance to cover your losses if an earthquake or heavy rains come. This is unethical and morally wrong and cannot continue. I've been telling you this for 10 years. Dogami's been telling you. When are you going to listen? In view of this information, will this city be so cavalier as to place senior citizens in assisted living facility knowing their lives could be in harm's way? Will you allow people in a hotel, in an office building, in apartments or row houses? Will this city tell them the truth? Where they are living is a dangerous, hazardous area, and you can get insurance nowhere in this entire world to cover anything that you lose. This city, along with Clackamas County, must go to the state and the federal government to work on a program seeking solutions to provide property owners with insurance for landslides and earthquakes in hazardous areas. This should have been done a long time ago by the city before the city went on a building binge. For all the reasons I have listed in my testimony, approval for a zone change or any anticipated development at this site should be denied for all of the reasons I've listed, especially in view of the fact that nobody can get insurance. I request also, both for myself and the people of Holly Lane, that you finally remove Holly Lane from your TSP. Myself and no one on Holly Lane, no one on Maple Lane, no one on Thayer, no one on Redland Road can get insurance. We all live within feet, within yards, certainly within a mile of a previous landslide. This city needs to reconsider how it's going to get its traffic from the hilltop down to the transportation corridor. Otherwise, all the development that you're planning is for naught. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be taking
You had one more.
Yeah, she just handed it to you.
That's right.
Sorry about that.
I got
Elizabeth.
I got a bonus testimony from Elizabeth
Are you sure?
Grazer Lindsay.
Thank you. I am Elizabeth Gracer Lindsay, and I wanted to object to this process because of the procedural error of not including some of the proper review criteria. The transportation planning rule and the statewide planning goals are omitted, and among the statewide planning goals, some of them are quite relevant to this, such as land use planning, resource quality, natural hazards, economic development, housing, and transportation. The transportation planning rule is violated by this proposal. The zone change would degrade the performance of the existing roads so that they would not meet the state and county performance standards. The state standards use the volume to capacity ratio for Highway 213, and the county uses this for Beaver Creek Road. The city's code acknowledges that the Beaver Creek Road and Highway 213 intersection is failing the volume to capacity standard. And when the Beaver Creek apartments were recently approved on Beaver Creek Road, there was documentation in that process that showed that the volume capacity standard was exceeded without the additional trips that this site would bring in, besides some other developments you've been approving in the meantime. The proposed trip limit cap doesn't prevent the degradation of the performance of the area roads by limiting the trips to the levels that the current zoning requires. The developer and city appear to be assuming that all those trips would be approved, but the build-out wouldn't comply with the transportation planning rule, and so all those trips would never have been allowed. And if you heard some of the previous comment tonight, you'd see that there were other factors that also wouldn't allow all those houses in that pretend subdivision to exist, because there is a lot of landslide potential, and just the lack of road capacity means that that is really a fake that doesn't represent what really could be built out. So that cap number is not realistic in any way. The site plan and design review criteria in your code require adequate roads be provided, and consideration shall be given to the need for street widening and other improvements that would be needed for the anticipated vehicular traffic generation. That's not being done here at all, of thinking about what road improvements are needed. In fact, it has been said over the years that an interchange might be needed at this intersection, and with this sort of development, it would really block getting that to be able to happen. The zone changes and amendments criteria are also not met. The proposal is not consistent with 14.3.2 in your comprehensive plan that says that extension of services should not diminish those services to existing areas. I see I'm running out of time, so I'll just kind of speed ahead. You're supposed to be planning for the allowed uses, but the developers made no effort to show what the full build-out, the ultimate build-out number of trips would be. So you don't really have any idea what would be expected. But in the letter from the consultant that the developer has of October 17th in your packet, it makes it clear that they want to actually exceed the cap. That's what the memo's about, is about how they want to exceed the cap. And they want to do this without the scrutiny that's required by this zone change process. They want to wait till this higher level of scrutiny is over and then change that under a simpler approach in the future. So I think that that would make this illegal to do that, because the full scrutiny should be applied to making sure that the roads are not impacted. The sewers are also not adequate for this development to comply, and we saw that in the recent Beaver Creek Road apartments and the Caulfield neighborhood in the sewer master plan. It shows that that would cause surcharging along Highway 213 farther down this area.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I think she's exceeded her 3 minutes.
Yes, this is true. Can you conclude quickly?
I
Okay.
don't have any problem if she wants to continue.
We also see that the local areas feeding this intersection are also above capacity, such as Highway 213 and Holly Lane, and even 205.
Thank you. I have one more person that wants to testify, Paul Edgar.
Thank you, Commission. Paul Edgar, Oregon City. I was honored to have an opportunity even with Elizabeth to do the Clackamas County Transportation System Plan, and I've been actively involved in transportation studies and efforts for probably 25 years. I think we all realize that the intersection of 213 and Beaver Creek Road is at LOSF right now and is failing. And we also realize that this will bring more traffic into it. And somewhere we've got to figure out who's going to pay for fixing it, or what are we going to do. And then I started looking at the Beaver Creek plan and the transportation studies, even on the concept plan. And most all of those studies are 10 years old. The traffic counts are not representative of what we really have today, and we're seeing these problems all over. And all I'm saying right now is, until we go in and do a new concept plan, a real update all of the information, get it accurate. We know we've got something that's failing. We don't know where we're going, how bad it's going to get, and we know we're adding significantly greater impacts, more incidents of travel. And somebody's going to have to pay, and I'm really concerned because the taxpayers of Oregon City are not ready to step up to the plate. And if you guys start putting this plan together and approve something, I think you're going totally against the grain of the people that are picking up that are in a position of picking up the bill. And it's wrong. I just want you to get your act together first, understand the conditions first before you make a ruling on this. I think you owe that to the citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify at this time? The applicant has an opportunity to rebut.
We could do it like the other one where they would rebut after we're going to leave the record open, continue it to the 30th.
We've been requested to continue.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions that have been asked that need to be answered.
Probably it would be wise to postpone the applicant's rebuttal until after the next hearing, and then they can be prepared to answer those questions.
I would imagine we're going to get additional comment in between there, so it would seem appropriate to have the rebuttal at the
I'd like
end.
to make a motion that we continue this with the public record open until November 30th.
Second.
I have a question for Laura before she calls the roll. So Laura, you were saying earlier that the public would have an opportunity to participate, but as I recall, unless you're suggesting that site plan and design review occur in a public process like a hearing, most people aren't going to respond to the level of detail and specificity that goes along with site plan and design review. So it's open, but it's not really open. And I'm just wondering if we can come up with another option as this, depending on whatever happens with this, so that the public could be more fully involved in a process like, I mean, this is pretty new to everybody. We've never really approached something like this before, and it seems to me that we as the city need to go a little bit up over and beyond the call of duty to make sure that there is something beyond a type 2, which design review basically is. So I'm just throwing that out there, not expecting an answer today, but just throwing that out there. Again, if it should get to that stage. I don't know if it will, I'm just suggesting.
So we have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Aye.
Commissioner Henkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Espy?
Aye.
Commissioner Maybe?
Aye.
Commissioner McGriff?
Aye.
Chair Kidwell?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you all for your attendance. Tony, do we have any communications?
I do not tonight.
No
I do,
communications?
but I would like to postpone it till later because I am pretty tired.
You want to make
Yes.
that a date certain?
No, I will. I wanted to give you sort of a brief overview. I spent a lot of time in D.C. this last week, and I talked up the Willamette Falls Legacy Project like crazy, and I wanted to report back.
You went to DC?
I said like crazy.
Went to DC.
Yes.